Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Harry Potter Son of Dark Lord and Fell in Love Andromeda Tonks. So do 4 blue hearts comment. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon for I have upload Harry x Hermione uncensored spicy version, link in description. Harry blinked. Once, twice, thrice. Suddenly, the whole world came back into view. Without his glasses, he could barely make out his surroundings. Grabbing around on the bedside table, he finally found what he was looking for. Suddenly, it hit him. Memories of last evening came flooding to the front of his consciousness. The duel with Voldemort, the Battle of Hogwarts, the deaths of Remus, Tonks, Fred, and others he couldn't make out hit him like a bludgeoning hex. As he stared into the oblivion of the curtains surrounding his bed, the sun rose through the Gryffindor Tower. Thanks to his body's need, Harry got up. A long shower later, he emerged from the washroom, feeling much better than when he had woken up. However, his mind was still going at 100 km/h. 17 years of his life had led to yesterday. Culminated in a duel that was won by knowing your opponent, rather than running headfirst into battle. Suddenly, he chuckled. He had died yesterday. And still, come back. Was it the Soul Shard or the Hallows? He mused. This was a mystery best left untouched. As he once again sat down, he reflected on the war. He had sacrificed his childhood, his teenage, all to Sue, Nter, a wizard who had the grandiose idea to rule the world. A wizard, who had gone through a childhood like him. It was a thin line that separated his and Riddle's childhood. Riddle had been right. They were similar in more ways than one. He thought of his parents, who he had once again seen thanks to the Resurrection Stone. Remus and Tonks, who had given their lives in battle. Sirius, his godfather. The man who had died to protect him. So that he could rescue the same people who had turned a blind eye to his innocence. People really were fickle. Teddy, he suddenly shouted. His godson. In though, say times alone after Remus had made him Teddy's godfather, Harry had often promised himself he'd take care of him to the best of his abilities. He knew he could not take care of a baby by himself, but he would ensure he would not be like Sirius. No child should ever have a childhood like him. Harry remained lost in his thoughts until he heard the hoot of an owl on the windowsill. He was tempted to ignore this, thinking it was probably fan mail, but the symbol on the letter made him do a double take. A pickaxe crossed with a halberd on a gold coin. Goblins. This was from Gringotts. The chickens had come home to roost. Ron and Hermione had been so focused on the goal that they had not thought to consider the consequence of their actions, except the obvious. This post was better left unignored. He remembered enough history thanks to Binns to know what could be in this post. Praying once again to magic, he opened and read the letter. His expression changed from a grimace to a scowl and finally, he took a sigh of relief and put the letter down. Mr. Harry James Potter. This missive is to inform you of your upcoming trial in front of the Goblin Nation for charges of breaking and stealing from the London Gringotts branch. You are ordered to report to the same branch as soon as possible, lest your vaults are seized. As informed by the newly reinstated Minister of Magic, we at G. Gringotts would like to thank you in getting rid of Tom Riddle. As per the Minister's information, the object you stole was detrimental to the death of said dark wizard. Keeping this in mind, the death penalty has been rescinded as the punishment. The matter of your inheritances also has to be discussed. Please get in touch with Gringotts as soon as possible. Ragnork, Bank Manager. Gringotts, London. He finally had something to do today. He was lucky he hadn't been sentenced to death by the Goblin Nation. After a quick breakfast in bed, courtesy of Creature, Harry left for Gringotts via Elf Express. Arriving in the lobby of the bank, Harry was immediately surrounded by guards and ushered into a room, unlike the one he had seen in the ministry during the trial. He was happy this place looked more like a place for finance rather than an execution. Seated at the table were 3 goblins, looking older than the most he had seen working here, yet their eyes betrayed experience and shrewdness. Welcome, Mr. Potter. I am Ragnork, the bank manager here, said the goblin in the middle. We're here to discuss your punishment for breaking and entering as well as theft against the Goblin Nation. As stated in our letter, the death penalty will not be awarded. Please present your case. Manager, Voldemort was an evil wizard through and through. In his search for immortality, he had made multiple soul containers. Suddenly the goblins grimaced. Harry's hope lifted. This was good. Soul containers. One of those was in the vault of Bellatrix Lestrange. We broke into steal that and destroyed it before the fighting yesterday, he finished. Mr. Potter, we, goblins are magical creatures, more in tune with the magic around than your average witch or wizard. This allows us to handle a lot of what you humans call a dark artifact without so much as a nick. Souls and blood, however, have a deeper bond with magic. Horcruxes are one of the few things that affect us. They retain the ability to possess goblins. Ragnork said. By this time, Harry was convinced he would be okay. A few hushed conversations between the three goblins later, Harry was told he was free except a fine of a few thusa. ND gallons to repair the physical damage. I would suggest, Mr. Potter, you visit the inheritance department. They have been wanting to get in touch for over a year now, said Ragnork, before ushering him out of the room towards another goblin, who led his to the said department. As he entered another room with an ornate door, a goblin made his way towards him. Hello Mr. Potter. I am Handslicer, the executor of wills and inheritances at Gringotts. Have a seat. As Harry sat down, he had two papers thrust into his hand. As you can see, you are the only member of the Potter family now, meaning you can use the family vault. It contains a few artifacts as well as everything that was recovered from your cottage in Godric's Hollow. It also has about 15,000 galleons in it. Continuing, he said, you would also know that Sirius Black made you his heir. Being the next descended male, you are now the head of the most noble and ancient House of Black. You are advised to go over this page conquering the Echo. And you have to announce your heir by tomorrow or make a will containing a suitable one. Harry took one look at the paper and he was shocked. Sirius had left him a lot. A seat on the Wizengmot too. It would take him some time to sort through everything on it. Why wasn't I told of all this last year? He asked the goblin. I am not sure. Albus Dumbledore came in your stead and told that you had been informed, replies the goblin. A trickle of anger built up inside Harry. His opinion of Dumbledore was degrading day by day. Dumbledore's youth did not bother him, but his decision during the First and Second Blood Wars did. He had let a lot of people die. Even though the monster was finally defeated, there was no one left who did not bear any scars. After making a simple will leaving everything to Teddy, Harry got up and respectfully bowed back. Sighing once again, he made his way out. Determined to visit Teddy and Andromeda. This had not been a waste after all. Calling for Creature once again. We waited in the lobby of the bank, planning the best way to go about what he was thinking to do. Creature, go find Professor McGonagall and ask her if I can speak to her in private as I have a few personal things to discuss with her. Yes, master, replied the elf, before he vanished with a pop. Going to the nearest teller, Harry asked for someone to take him to his trust vault. Better play it safe and get Teddy a toy. He thought. As he left the bank under a glamour charm and browsed the few shops open, he managed to find a wolf, a dog and a stag stuffed animal. Grinning to himself, Harry paid for the gifts. Wondering whether he should have a quick lunch before his meeting, he made his way to the Leaky Cauldron. However, he couldn't help himself and stop on the way through to look at the Weasleys' shop, which had been completely vandalized. The Snatchers and Death Eaters had ensured nothing remained of it, and Harry was hopeful the twins had got the merchandise out. Then it hit him. There weren't the twins anymore. Fred had left them, died at the hands of a curse, laughing like Sirius had before his fall through the veil. What was it about pranksters that they got such a fate? As he collapsed to his knees, he heard Creature apparate next to him, before the bony hands grabbed him and the elf apparated out. Still shedding tears, it took Harry a while before he figured out he was in the headmaster's study in Hogwarts. As he lay on the floor, he could see Professor McGonagall looking down on him, tears in her eyes as well. In an uncharacteristic move, she suddenly bent down and gave him a tight hug. It felt unlike the ones he was used to from Hermione and Mrs. Weasley. Those almost always ensured he was out of his breath. It'll be okay, Harry. He's gone. We are going to be all right, she said in a soothing voice, trying to calm down the teenager, no man who had saved them all. He had suffered the most through this whole ordeal and now that it was behind them, he felt lost. She had never agreed with Dumbledore methods and policies when it came to Harry, but she had not contested him either. Dumbledore was the leader they had chosen to follow and listen to, and they did that. But now that he was gone, she knew that the lad who had had nothing on his mind for the last 7 years except he who must not be named, was finally at peace to do what he wanted, yet he couldn't. She had failed him before. But the situation was in her hands now, and she wasn't going to mess it up. Levitating the young man to the nearest chair, she rushed to pull out her bottle of scotch and 2 glasses. Before pouring a healthy measure in each and offering it to Harry, before having hers. "Harry, your house elf told me you wanted to talk about something private, and I know T.S. does not seem like the best time to make any sort of decision, but I hope you will tell me what is bothering you. I can only postulate what you are going through, but I think in this case, sharing might help you," she said, before encouraging the young man to have his drink. As he gasped when the liquid hit his throat, she could not suppress the giggle that threatened to erupt on her face. "Professor McGonagall, I thought about a few things last night and I would like your honest opinion on it." "Go on, Harry. I promise I will be as honest as possible." "Professor, do you think Professor Dumbledore raised me as a martyr and a soldier of war, rather than the normal childhood bullshit he always gave me?" This was a trick question in Harry's mind. He knew he had been raised to be a lamb for slaughter. Dumbledore had known he was a Horcrux and yet had failed to inform him. He had left Harry with no resources and no help on a quest that would have failed 9 times out of 10 if not for sheer, dumb luck. Professor McGonagall frowned but did not say anything. Harry had made a valid point. As the silence grew and she thought more and more about the situation, the frown lines on her face seemed to increase. The announcement of where the stone was. A 12-year-old girl figuring out about the monster in the Chamber of Secrets before anyone else, the whole Sirius debacle, the whole of the Triwizard Tournament and Umbridge fiasco, and finally the year of the Death Eater Malfoy. Albus had led Harry on a path by his nose and left him loose, to find his own way. The more she thought, the more worried she became. "Professor, the silence speaks so much louder than words. I came to the same conclusion some time ago. Irrespective of his good intentions, we were but mere chess pieces to Albus Dumbledore in his match against Tom Riddle." He had made a point to look at the portrait of Professor Dumbledore when he said this. Minerva noted that he had, somehow vanished. He had been there when Harry had arrived. "Coward," muttered Harry, under his breath. "All my life, Professor, has been Voldemort this and Voldemort that. Ever since I entered the magical world, he has affected my every moment. And now that he is gone, I realize that the man who I looked up to, the man who in all guided us to victory, was Saint Ether. He shaped me, influenced me. I look at some of my life choices and wonder, how different would they have been if I had thought them through. Did you know that I was owed a life debt from Gabriel, Fleur's sister, formed the Triwizard Tournament? Fleur told me when we were hiding in Shell Cottage that if I had called that in to help Sirius get a trial in France, the ICW could have cleared him of all charges and he would have been a free man. Did you also know that Sirius's will had an option for me to become emancipated on his death, which was waived off by Professor Dumbledore in my stead, without my knowledge? He might have done things for the greater good, but he messed up my life real good," said Harry, as he refilled his glass and gulped it down as well. Professor McGonagall had gone rigid as a stone. She had thought of Albus being an honorable man, but if what Harry had told her was true, then High's mechanisms ran deeper than she had ever imagined. Sirius being a free man would have negated the whole Dom fiasco. "Professor, that is not all. I have kept a lot of my home life private, but this discussion is cathartic. And I need you hear me out." As Harry went into a long and wide description of his life at the Dursleys, Minerva could not take it anymore. She was crushed and she broke down. The son in front of her had suffered so much and sacrificed everything on the whims of a man whose care for him had been questionable, for people who hated him one day and loved him the other. As time went by, the discussion got more and more detailed. Emotions, thoughts, feeling were discussed. Situations were analyzed. Motives were questioned. Years later, Harry would tell his children how the discussion that one day over scotch with his favorite professor would help him get over his fears and do better than any therapy ever could. It was dinner time when the discussion ceased. As he was about to leave, Harry remembered the real reason he had been here. Professor, I need 2 favors from you. Anything, she replied. I need you to tell me where Andromeda Tonks lives. It's time I met my godson. And I need you to cover for me for a few days. I know people will be flocking to me. Ron and Hermione will be worried. But I do not have the will to face them. I just want to spend some time with myself. That is understandable, Harry. Here is the address. Ask Creature to take you there, she replied, handing him a parchment on which she had scribbled the address. Professor, please let Kingsley know that my situation with the goblins has been sorted out as well. And most of all, thank you for your time today. You do not know what it means to me. I will let him know. And Harry, the day you let our past govern your future is the day you get nothing done. Always remember that. Now go. You deserve this, said Professor McGonagall. As Creature popped him out of Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall gave a scathing look to the portrait whose occupant had appeared again. I hope you are happy, Albus. We created a monster and thanks to that, the next 2 generations are destroyed. I hope you find whatever peace you sought, she said, before sweeping out of the room towards her personal quarters, not waiting to see the look of utter shock and dejection on the face of the man she had once considered her mentor and dear friend. The discussion had been draining, the bottles they had consumed had been cleaned, and it was time she did some self-reflection herself, she thought. As Creature popped Harry to tea, location Minerva McGonagall had told him, he looked around with worry. The house was not there. It took him a few moments to realize that with Lupin and Tonks probably living there, the house was bound to be under protection. Unplottable and hidden under wards. Wondering whether he should ask Creature to see if he could get to Mrs. Tonks, he felt a slight breeze before whipping his head around to see a house suddenly become visible. It was not like Grimmauld Place, even the sudden appearance of the house looked more refined. He could also make out a woman making her way towards her, and it took him a moment to compose himself. The woman looked eerily similar to Bellatrix Lestrange, but at the same time, she did not. Her face lacked the vindictive smile, the eyes didn't portray the mad gleam that seemed to haunt Bellatrix. She looked in better shape, but the signs of recent sufferings were quite visible, in the form of tear tracks that marred her face. Is that you, Mr. Potter? Or should I say Lord Black? Said Andromeda Tonks. Yes, Mrs. Tonks. But please, call me Harry. I have never been Mr. Potter, and I am yet to know anything about being Lord Black, replied the young man. As only when she got even closer that Harry spotted a tiny human body, completely covered in blankets that seemed to cling to her bosom. Mrs. Tonks had followed his eyes, and a soft, small smile made its way to his face before she lifted up the blankets that covered the baby to make him more visible. Immediately, Harry knew he was done for. He had never seen a baby before, but he had been up face to face with the worst of evil that existed. And it could not hold a candle to the sheer look of innocence and purity that the small bundle of joy seemed to radiate. Is that Teddy? He asked. Yes, that is Theodore Remus Lupin. Please come inside. I have added you to the wards, so there should not be any issues. Do you want to hold him? Asked the older woman, before handing him the little boy upon seeing him nod. After instructing him on the correct way to hold a baby, she turned and started to walk inside, noting that the eyes of the young man had not left the baby for a single moment. Mrs. Tonks, how did you know, and why did you call me Lord Black? Asked Harry. Harry, as you might know, I was Andromeda Black before my marriage. I was disowned by the family, never to use the name again, but my grandfather, who was Lord Black at that time, did not rob me of the family magic. Seeing what happened to my family, I made sure to use wards that would let me know of any Black family member coming to my home. Sirius and Nymphadora both registered in it, and so does Theodore. So, imagine my surprise when the wards alerted me that Lord Black was approaching the house. I knew your grandma. Her was a Black, and being Sirius's godson, he was sure to have passed on the lordship to you. That's why I knew you were Lord Black, and that's why the house suddenly became visible, replied Mrs. Tonks. Please sit down. Would you like some tea? On hearing the reply, Mrs. Tonks swished her wand, and Harry saw a kettle fill with water and make its way towards the stove. Taking the lead, Harry decided. It was time to go forward with the talk. I am really sorry for your loss, Mrs. Tonks. Remus was like a father to me, and Tonks like an elder sister. I really loved them, and I could not have been prouder to be named the godfather to their son. I cannot begin to tell you how sorry I am, but I know it dims in comparison to your loss." As he looked up, he saw tears form in the eyes of the older woman and she sniffed. "Thank you, Harry. I tried to get her to stay, but Nymphadora did not listen to me. She loved Remus too much to let him go alone, and she went and did something she believed in wholeheartedly. And I could never fault her for that. Remus always thought he owed you for not being a part of your life. His life had come crashing down after the First War, and by the time he got himself in some form or shape, it was a bit late. He told me he went to Dumbledore and asked to meet you, even offered to take you to Diagon Alley for the first time but was refused. Dumbledore convinced him that you were in a safe environment, and like all others, he took those words for the truth. It crushed him when he found out about your life. Nymphadora told me it took her and Sirius to stop him from tearing Dumbledore a new one." She chuckled a bit at the end, only to see the boy smile sadly and bite back a laugh as well. Harry reflected back on the conversation with Professor McGonagall. And her incident that Albus Dumbledore had engineered then. He knew that Professor McGonagall had taken Hermione to Diagon Alley and Professor Flitwick had taken Terry Boot, a Muggle-born Ravenclaw, in his year. Why then was Hagrid there to introduce him to this world? Wouldn't Remus have been a much better choice? Harry had nothing against Hagrid, but the man could be as heavy-handed as they come. Before she could say anything else, the kettle whistled. The shrill sound was soon accompanied by a small cry that seemed to emanate from the baby in Harry's arms. Harry looked down and could only stare in wonder at the soft brown eyes that looked back at him. Suddenly, the baby smiled, and his features seemed to shift. Soft brown became striking jade. The few hairs on the head went black. The smile became even more pronounced. Harry could only look at the baby with wonder and joy. Only Tonks's baby could be like this. As if on instinct, he raised the boy's head before laying a small kiss on the baby's forehead. The tiny hands seemed to paw at his spectacles before making their way, surprisingly, to the scar on his forehead. The scar, which had bled open on his death and now was little more than a smidge. Andromeda Tonks had followed the whole scene with a smile and amazement. She had lost her husband and her daughter in the last year. Anyone else would have gone catatonic, but this was Andromeda Tonks. She was raised a black. Her daughter's last words to her would forever be with her. "I don't know what will happen, Mum. But please take of Teddy. Help him grow to become the best possible man he can. If I do not come back, tell him about me and Remus. And Harry. Tell him, his parents fought so that he could have a better world, before disappearing." It was with a heavy heart and an abune dance of tears that she had looked at the letter informing her that you know who had lost, but she had lost her daughter and her son-in-law as well. Her grandson was left an orphan. But remembering our daughter's last words had strengthened her resolve. Now, she knew she would have more help than she could have asked for. The boy looked simply taken by the baby. His attention was nowhere else but directed solely at the baby in his arms. Tea was served and a few topics about the future and past were discussed. Harry was especially interested to know about the few days Sirius had spent with her rather than at Grimmauld Place. He had been smuggled out of that place by Remus and Tonks to meet his favorite cousin, only to be hexed by her for not being a responsible parent and a dunderhead. It had taken a ton of apologizing by the convict before he was engulfed in a strong hug. That conversation had brought a smile to both their faces. "Harry, you must be hungry. Let me whip something up quickly." "Don't bother Mrs. Tonks. Creature," shouted Harry. "Master calls," asked the old elf before turning to look at Andromeda. "Good afternoon, Mistress Tonks." This shocked the older woman. She had dealt with Creature in her youth. But the elf before her was not what she had been described to by Sirius. "Creature, can you get something for us for dinner? Also, get some milk for the baby?" he asked, with a questioning gaze towards the grandmother of said baby, only to be given a small nod of encouragement. "Creature can, Master. He will be back soon," said the elf, before vanishing. "Harry, I have a request to make of you. In your official capacity as Lord Black." Before she could say anything further, Harry spoke up. "Mrs. Tonks, is this about bringing you back into the family? 'Cause I would be happy to do it. However, I do not know how, so it will take some time." Mrs. Tonks beamed at him. "Thank you, Harry. I would love that. Still, just hear me out. Because of Remus's condition, the first thing I did when Teddy was born was to check him. He is not a werewolf, but on the full moon, naturally transforms into a wolf animagus. Still, he was not registered with the ministry due to his Arthur's condition and the situation at that time in the country. By bringing me back into the family, both Dora and Teddy will be brought in as well, and yet, the whole world will look to him as a werewolf, and he will be faced with rampant discrimination. It is in his best interest that you register him as your godson, or son if you could. I know for a fact that you might not like that and take. It is an offense to the memory of Remus, but you are his parent for all intents and purposes. I know you would want to avoid making mistakes like Sirius and be a part of his life. As wrong as it may seem, you would be doing what was best for Remus's son, something he could never fault you for. You are a young, intelligent man. I know you will take care of him in the best way possible, and I would love to have you as a part of his life. Harry had frowned, but the sincerity in the words of the woman in front of him had made his reconsider a bit. Whatever she had said was 100% true. He was willing to do whatever it took to keep his godson safe. Sirius might have not done a great job in the beginning, but he had never ever let Harry doubt the love and affection he possessed for him. She saw the understanding dawn on the face of the young man and carried on. By taking an actual blood adoption, you could become his sworn godfather. Change his name to Theodore Remus Black, make him a part of your family. That was all it took. Those were the golden words spoken. Mrs. Tonks, he already is my heir. When I went to Gringotts in the morning, I made him my heir. Teddy will inherit everything I own or possess. And I promise you, I will be a part of his life. Enough with Mrs. Tonks. Please call me Andromeda or Andy if you would prefer that. Harry gave her a shy smile. Okay, Andromeda. Soon Creature pooped back with their dinner and insisted to feed the baby himself. Young Master Black will be fed by Creature as Master has his food, said the old elf in his bullfrog-like voice before taking the baby. Harry and Andromeda chuckled. Having Creature around would be a blessing in disguise. After the food was eaten and the plates cleared, Andromeda took the baby from Creature. It was nap time, and as good as Harry was, she was sure he could not put the baby to sleep. A yawn came from where Harry was sitting, and she knew he would too soon fall asleep. Bidding him a good night and offering the guest bedroom, which he gratefully accepted, she left to put the baby to sleep. Harry reflected on his day as he lay down to sleep in the bed in the Tonks house. Today had been a big day in his life. The meeting at Gringotts had offered him a way in the future, the meeting with McGonagall had offered him a look into the past, and the meal with Andromeda had given a new meaning to his life. He got up suddenly to hastily pen letter to Ron, Hermione, Kingsley and the Weasley clan. He asked Minerva to inform them, yet he thought that they would prefer a personal touch. The letters to Ron and Hermione had been full of thanks for all their effort and a promise to meet in the near future. He also mentioned his need for a break from his life and his subsequent disappearance. He did not say anything about anything that had happened today. He would only do so once he was at peace with himself and understood the consequence of everything. The letter to the Weasley clan was one of sorrow, pain and support. He was mentioned, especially for Ginny, that he would have a talk with her. He knew he had left her on a bad note with a promise of a future, but he did not know now that he meant it. He had new priorities in life, and he was not so sure about whether Ginny would see it that way. For all her goodness, she had a Weasley temper inherited from her mother. His foray into his memories of his childhood had also stirred something weird up. A mother of 7, who had herself been to Hogwarts, shouting about muggles on a full platform. Ron finding him on a train where compartments were magical. The hero worship that his introducers to the wizarding world, namely Hagrid and the Weasleys, seemed to possess for Dumbledore. It had never occurred to him, but the Golden Trio, as they were called, were a half-blood, a pureblood and a muggle born in the sight of light. They all had been willingly or unwillingly been a part of the grand scheme of things that Albus Dumbledore seemed to have had. He would need a lot of time to sort through his paranoia now. A lot of his feelings and thoughts would need to be evaluated. By Merlin, he had began to rue the day Albus Dumbledore had come into his life. Kingsley's letter was a bit more on the official side. He mentioned thanks for sorting out the mess with the goblins, a few impersonal details about his visit to Gringotts and his request for a meeting soon to discuss some personal matters. Kingsley, being the new Minister of Magic and a member of the Order of the Phoenix, was in a good position to help this crumbling sock. It on its feet, and he was someone Harry was willing to support, unlike Fudge or Scrimgeour. After asking Creature to deliver these letters for him, he thought about the conversation he would have with Andromeda tomorrow about the future before the land of Morpheus claimed him. His last thoughts were lyrics of a song he had once heard on the run. And no one showed us where to land. And no one knows that wheres are wise. But something stirs and something tries. And starts to climb towards the light. Harry blinked. Once, twice, thrice. Stretched his body to get rid of the cramping before he sat up abruptly. His nightmares, full of loss, often took him back to the war. It had been 1 week since the last time he had woken up like this, having defeated the Dark Lord. 1 week, since his life had done a 180. 1 week, that in the simplest of terms had been the best week he had lived in his short life. With no obligation to anything, he had used this time to have a normal semblance of life for once. Since that day, he had been living in the Tonks house, spending his whole day with Teddy, helping Andromeda take care of him. A few evenings, he had left to meet a few people, do a few chores, and undertake a few tasks he had set for himself. Primary of those, the guardianship for Teddy, the adoption ritual and the renovation of 12, Grimmauld Place. Even though this place held many memories for her, it also reminded Andromeda of the loss of her daughter and husband every day. So, it was of no surprise to him that she had agreed to move out of this place and taken up his offer of living at the Black ancestral home. Not only would it make it easier for her and Harry, but it would also come with the addition of Creature and better wards. The war was over, but Harry would always be a person of interest. And that meant he would need to remain careful. That very evening, Harry had left with Creature to see the house. It was relatively unscathed, thanks to the house refusing entry without the express permission of Lord Black to anyone. The front garden and the neighborhood looked destroyed. The Death Eaters had not taken it kindly to not being allowed entry, but Creature assured the house was not damaged from the inside. As soon as he had approached the door, it had swung open and the wards had attuned themselves to him. The house and magic had accepted him as Lord Black. A ring materialized on his hand. It must have been somewhere in the house. It was a bit gaudy but had a huge green emerald, flanked by onyx. This color scheme reminded him of the decorations inside the house. He chuckled to himself and moved inside. The exploration had taken him an hour or two, but the result had been most positive to say the least. The rooms would need to be renovated a bit and the whole house cleaned, but it would do for now. He grinned to himself. Andromeda could handle the redecoration. It would give her something to do. He had returned that evening for dinner to find Teddy playing with the wolf-stuffed animal. That simple gesture had brought a huge smile to his face and he had gone to bed, a happy man. The next day was primarily spent with the goblins at Gringotts. Arriving at Diagon Alley, all of them under a glamour, Harry was surprised to see the pace with which people moved on with their lives. Already, more shops were open than the last time he had been here. And surely, more people were out and about. Making their way to Gringotts, Harry was glad of the anonymity the glamours offered him. Their first place of visit was the goblin who would look after the Black family vault and investments, whose name was, to Harry's amusement, Blanife. The goblin, on the other hand, sported a sneer worthy of Severus Snape. Severus Snape was another person Harry was conflicted about. He was glad for the man's sacrifice and help, but his motives and the way he went about it had not gone down well with him. Even though his love for Lily Potter was there, his hatred for James Potter ran deeper. The memories he had seen in the Pensive were a clear indication of the fact. He had wanted the Dark Lord to kill the baby but let the mother live. Harry had little knowledge about how a happy family worked, but if his exposure to the Weasleys and his recent time spent with Teddy were indication enough, then Snape had been a fool to believe that Lily Potter would have wanted anything to do with him after the Dark Lord killed her son and husband. Instead of seeing Harry as the son of a woman he had loved, he had always seen him as the son of a man he had hated, a man who had married the woman that he had loved. He had let his hatred win over his love and had died a bitter man to the end. As a war hero, Harry would make sure his name was remembered. As a man, Harry would ensure he went down in history as a person who bullied and downright abused a young boy because of a grudge he could not let go. The goblin, who had remembered Andromeda from his previous dealings with the Black family, was quick in uptake, and it was in less than an hour that both Andromeda and Teddy had been added to the Black family, with a trust vault set up for Teddy. They were both allowed access to the family vault as well. The blood adoption had been a simple process. The goblins had been more than happy to help him, for a fee of course. A simple potion, with a drop of Harry's blood, was given to Teddy, who had drunk the whole thing in one go. Magic, it seems, never stopped to amaze him with its simplicity. An inheritance test later confirmed it. Teddy was now officially Theodore Remus Black. Papers were drawn up for guardianship and acceptance of lordship for Teddy and Harry respectively, and dispatched off to the ministry. Thanking Blanite for all his help, the Blacks left the bank. The next day saw Harry replying to the letters he had received in response to his previous communications. Ron, it seems, was recovering slowly from the battle and the year of living on the run. His letter was not as rude and out of context as some of the previous communications they had had, but it still grated on his nerves a bit. Ron was enjoying being in the spotlight. Being hailed as a hero in his own for once suited him. Harry hoped it did not go to his head. Even though Ron was still his closest male friend, Harry had truly never forgiven him for the fourth-year debacle. He had known about Ron's insecurities due to being brought up in a big family, but would have expected them to manifest them in the way they did that year. His outburst on Hermione after the ball and tea information withholding before the return to Grimmauld Place had always been in the back of his mind, so it came as no surprise to Harry that Ron had actually run off during the hunt. Somewhere, deep down, Harry had always known something like this had the potential to happen, and that when it did, it would only be him and Hermione left standing. He had refused to believe it, hoping that a situation like that would not come to pass. And yet, he was not surprised it happened. Dumbledore had apparently foreseen that as well and made appropriate arrangements in the form of the Deluminator, should that come to pass. Every single time he thought that somewhere along the way something had happened for good or for worse, there was Albus Dumbledore. Even after his death, Harry could feel his hand extending beyond the grave, still influencing his decisions and thoughts. Ron had also told him, in simple terms, to stop whining like a baby and come to the burrow and spend time with his family. Harry had no clue how to respond to that. Hermione, in the most Hermione-ish way, had recommended him going to a Muggle or a squib psychiatrist and get help while reading some books on PTSD in the meantime. Her idea held merit, but Harry had realized that his talk with Professor McGonagall and Andromeda had been helping him quite well, and Teddy had been an angel sent from heaven. She had also mentioned that her parents were in Australia, happy and well, and that she planned to travel there next month to get them back. She had been staying at the burrow and wanted him to come by as soon as he was feeling up to it. Harry had not read any of his other letters for a while, just read these two back and forth with a glass of fire whiskey in his hand. Teddy had been sleeping and Andromeda had gone furniture shopping for Grimmauld Place, so Harry had been able to do all this in peace. Another surprise for him was that both of his friends had apparently not mentioned anything about their new relationship. Were they okay? Getting along fine or already on the rails? Harry pondered this question for some time before his glass of whiskey finished and Teddy could be heard crying from the next room. Fun time is over, Harry had thought before making his way to his son. It was only late at night when he had gotten another chance to read the other letters. The Weasleys were still in mourning due to Fred's death, but were in better spirits since the war had ended. Harry knew those wounds would take time to heal, and the best thing would be to let them. He did not know how the emotional mother hen Mrs. Weasley would react to it. Mr. Weasley was working back in the ministry and, being a senior member before the war, was given the second in command of the DMLE. It was a big step up for him, and Harry knew that the DMLE was now in safe hands. Kingsley had done a stellar job of getting the ministry back on its feet, as the news of daily arrest and trials on former Death Eaters or Empathizers was aired on the WWW or mentioned in the Daily Prophet. Suddenly, a frown marred Harry's face. The last paragraph had been from Ginny. She had, in no simple terms, told him to stop hiding and get his ass to the burrow. She had also mentioned their breakup due to the war, and now that the war was over, a talk that was in order. A talk he had known was coming but had wanted to avoid in principle. It would not be quiet. That Harry was sure about. Ginny, he knew, loved being the eye of the public. She had been popular at school, and being the only girl child of the family, had been the center of attention there as well. Harry, on the other hand, had always wanted anything other than that. If he could, Harry would have loved to blend in with the shadows. Now that the war was over and his popularity in Wizarding Britain was probably at its peak, it was sure to become more difficult for him. He also had a new goal in mind. Ginny was young, a teenager thrust into a war they had no business being in the first place. She had her own dreams and goals, and Harry wondered if they would align with his. Harry sure hoped she got to play for the Harpies like she wanted to cause deep down. He knew that Ginny would not want to raise Teddy like he had his heart set on. Kingsley's letter, on the other hand, had been encouraging to say the least. He had personally signed the adopt I on paper and had made sure they were recorded yet not made public. He had made it clear though, that he would have to eventually come out and set the tone straight, as the whole thing would not remain hidden for long. He had been supportive of the decision though, something which pleased Harry. Kingsley had also appreciated the heads up about him being the new Lord Black. He needed all hands on board, and Harry being with him in the Wizangma, he hoped would help make the session easier for him. Harry had chuckled at that. Easy or not, it was something he looked forward to. The last paragraph was a bit cryptic thought. He had invited Harry for a meeting in his office in the recent future but not said why. Harry assumed it would be related to his year on the run or what all they had done to ensure Riddle's demise. His paranoia had made him think the worse about the whole situation, but he knew from the correspondence itself that it was Kingsley only. The next morning, he had asked Andromeda for advice on this. Her reply had been simple. Ask him on a piece of parchment as Lord Black and tell Creature to wait for an answer. Harry had done exactly that, and Creature had swiftly returned with a reply. Nothing much. Lord Black. A simple meeting with me to discuss what information would be shared with the public about the war, followed by an interview with a reporter of the Daily PR. Offset of my choosing, he's a schoolmate of mine, Darius Quillfast. Completely unlike Rita. Don't worry to spread your story and thoughts a bit. Harry had not liked the interview part one bit, but Andromeda had explained to him its importance from Kingsley's point of view. The more damning the evidence against the war criminals, the easier it would be to put away the people who had hidden in the backlines. Harry had reluctantly agreed and penned his reply. He groaned. The interview was tomorrow. Today was Teddy's day out. Shopping and frolicking in the park nearby. Harry was looking forward to a lazy day in the park. Shopping. Not so much. Next chapter. The Prophet interview, reactions, and Daphne and Tracy joined the party. Harry's weak in a few lines. I took a heavenly ride through our silence. I knew the moment had arrived. For killing the past and coming back to life. Coming back to life, Pink Floyd. The sun shone bright with a few clouds dotting the sky. It was one of the few pleasant British mornings, and one which Harry Potter had no chance of staying in any longer. He delayed this moment for as much as he could. Like most men, he had no interest in going shopping. But this was for Teddy, who had been going through his clothes at an alarming rate. Kind of hard to do that when you can change your shape at will. Instead of choosing one of the big-name brands, Harry and Andromeda decided to go to one of the smaller new shops that had opened up in London. Even with a notice me not charm on his hair, explaining a continuous changing hairstyle would have been a pain in the ass in this way. The public could be hopefully avoided. As soon as he entered the shop, Harry's eyes did a customary check of the surroundings. Sometimes, it was hard to believe that the war was over. Nothing but time would help him with the reflexes that had been born out of a life of staying sharp all the time, lest a spell or punch hit. It was not something he was utterly proud of. Moving around the different displays, Harry mused about the different designs. A lot of them featured Muggle cartons and some even had unicorns on them. It seemed Muggle girls loved them a lot, and Harry knew, T must have been a squib who was designing them. May I help you? Said a voice from behind him. Harry turned abruptly and held the gaze of the person. He knew the voice. This was the last place he expected to hear it. Standing behind him was an acquaintance he had not seen in over a year. A year, he could tell in a moment, had not been good to her. Her hair lacked the care. Her face had lost some substance. Those amethyst eyes had lost their shine. Standing behind him, equally transfigured, in store clothes, stood Daphne Greengrass. "Harry, is that you?" asked Daphne Greengrass. Waking up in the morning. Coming to work to open the shop at 7 a.m., Harry Potter was the last man she had expected to see walk into her shop. She had not seen him for over a year, ever since Dumbledore's funeral had been held in the grounds of Hogwarts. In that period of time, he had won a war. Beaten the greatest Dark Lord in living memory in a duel after having been on the run, as the undesirable number 1 for the same period of time. "Hey, Daphne, what are you doing here?" replied Harry, with a small smile on his face. Unlike the rampant hatred of Slytherins that was prevalent among the Gryffindors, Daphne had been one of the few Slytherins that he had been on good terms with, the others being her sister Astoria and best friend Tracy Davis. "I could ask you the same question. Shouldn't you be with the rest of the Golden Trio, parading yourself among the throngs of magical Britain?" replied Daphne sarcastically. They glared at each other, before breaking into laughter. This had been a common feature of their time spent together, and both of them could tell they enjoyed it. "Harry, did you find Somethy?" "Andy number, I did not. I ran into someone though." "Andy, meet Daphne Greengrass." "Daphne, my Aunt Andromeda Tonks née Black." Andromeda stopped and gave the witch a look over. She knew that stance, that posture, that expression. She had seen it in the mirror every day for the past 30 years. "Hello, Daphne. It's nice to see you. Cyrus's daughter, I presume," said Andromeda. Harry could have sworn her shoulders tensed a bit. "Yes, Miss Tonks. It's nice to finally meet you in person. Your exploits are quite popular in the Slytherin witches' rooms," replied Daphne with a completely neutral, yet guarded expression. Andromeda gave her a look of surprise before she turned to Harry. "I'll take care of the shopping, Harry. You guys go and catch up and take Teddy with you. He's getting restless and I can't take a tantrum right now. The day is so good." Harry gave her a look of pure surprise, before smiling and murmuring, "Thanks," as he lifted Teddy in his arms. "Let me just get someone to cover for me and I'll meet you outside in 5 minutes, replied Daphne, before she moved away to find some other attend. "Slytherin. Huh. Nice to know. I did not expect to meet the Slytherin friend of the boy who lived, working in a Muggle clothing store," said Andromeda. "Yeah, she always was different. I made the mistake to compare her to Malfoy and his cronies once." "Never again. That bad?" asked Andromeda with a smirk. "She gave me a shrinkage that took Poppy 5 hours to correct." "Most embarrassing moments of my life," replied Harry while Andromeda laughed her ass off. It was to this scene that Daphne walked back to. She knew a bit about Harry's life, and this hearing him chuckle like this warmed her heart. "Come on, Harry. There's a great cafe nearby and I've got Lucy here to help Miss Tonks with whatever she might need." Saying their goodbyes, the duo left the shop, never noticing the smirk that plastered the face of Andromeda Tonks. The cafe was nice and had a small but serviceable menu. They ordered their coffee while Teddy cooed at the pigeons. "Hey, Daff, you didn't tell me how you ended working in Muggle London in a clothing shop of all places." The rarely used nickname of hers brought a smile to her face. "You must understand, Harry, that being a pureblood woman in the Dark Lord's reign was like being a commodity. We were but broodmares to increase the longevity of pureblood lines," said Daphne with a sad smile. "Our family was approached by the Dark Lord's agents as well. Astoria was to be contracted to Draco Malfoy while I was to be contracted to Theodore Nott. As Astoria was underage, she was to be married later but I wasn't that lucky. Nott wanted to marry me at Christmas. And I wasn't going let that happen to me. So, I ran away. Plain and simple." Harry looked at her with apprehension and sadness in his eyes. He knew that the wizarding world was not always good for men, but marrying the likes of Draco Malfoy and Theo Nott would have been a cruel punishment. "My parents supported me. The contract was in my name, but I had not signed it in my blood. So my magic was not harmed when I ran away. The only consequence was that my father had to kick me out of the family. I became Daphne No Name. Tracy, being a half-blood, had already run away with her mother after Death Eater killed her father in a raid. I was in contact with her and my father was gracious enough to open a vault in her name and supply us with the money. Me and Tracy own that shop. Daphne was looking down on the ground, ashamed of her situation when something tugged on her sleeve. Teddy was looking at her with those big eyes, with his arms raised, motioning her to pick him up. As soon as she did that, he shrugged. She gasped. His features changed. His eyes became the same shade as hers, yet brighter. He smiled at her as if to show his achievement, and it became even more pronounced when she smiled back. Enough about me. When did this happen? Said Daphne, as she looked at the boy who was trying to crawl his way even further into her lap. Daph, this is my son, Teddy Black. Son? Asked Daphne, with her eyebrow raised. Harry just smiled back. Daphne knew there was something there he didn't want to tell. It was a smile that could light up the whole world. They talked about a few inconsequential things before Teddy made it abundantly clear it was feeding and then nap time. While Harry made to feed Teddy due to Daphne's lack of experience, he refused to go to sleep anywhere but in her arms. Harry chuckled. Teddy was proving to be someone who would get his way. By hook or by crook. He already knew this kid was trouble. And he loved him even more for it. They walked back together to the store before Harry paid for the purchases and promised to keep in touch before apparating away. He missed the wistful look that Daphne gave him or the looks her coworkers were throwing her. Dap. HNE went home after what had turned out to be a long day. It wasn't the hours, but the mental toll that the discussion with Harry had taken. Her reputation for being the Ice Queen had been well deserved. But these had been some of the worst memories of her life, and had it not been for the support of Harry holding on to her hand or the bundle of joy named Teddy Black, she doubted she wouldn't have shed a tear or two. Lost in her thoughts, she knocked on the door of her modest two-bedroom apartment that she shared with Tracy and her mum in Islington. Tracy's mum opened the door. Annabelle Davis W. As a proud Muggle-born Ravenclaw, and it showed. She had shrewd eyes and an uncanny nature to spot lies. Yet, she was blessed with a tongue that would not stop talking. A habit that had sadly not skipped a generation. Hey, Daphne. You looked tired. Why don't you have a shower and I'll get the dinner ready? Tracy just got back from her shift as well. Thanks, Mrs. D. I'll do just that. A half an hour later found the household sitting at the modest dining table, having chicken salad and soup for dinner. It was a Davis specialty, one that Daphne liked a lot. The silence was broken by a single statement. You will not believe who came to the store today. From your expression, maybe it was one of those movie heroes Tracy has a poster of, replied Annabelle while smirking. No, Mrs. D. It was someone from the wizarding world. What with that smile, Daph? Did Harry Potter walk into the store or what? Yup, came the reply, with the P drawn out. The silence was a sight to behold in the Davis household. With his son, the silence was broken with the sound of a spoon hitting the floor before both Davis's jaws followed suit. Harry Potter, the boy who lived. Yup. With his son. Yup. You're shitting me. Language. Tracy, replied her mother. It's all right, Mrs. D. I swore louder in the store. He had come with his son, Teddy Black, and his aunt Andromeda Tonks to buy some clothes for the little tyke. We chatted a bit and went for a coffee later while Mrs. Tonks shopped. Tracy was still looking at her with a wicked smile, a smile she knew too well. She was going to embarrass her. So Daph, tell me. Is he still like he was in school, or had he become even yummier? Daphne blushed and stammered a reply. Sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you be clearer? Prodded Tracy. Fatherhood suits him, mumbled Daphne before both Tracy and Annabelle broke into laughter. Daphne cursed herself for bringing this topic up as she devoured her dinner. As he walked into the Ministry of Magic under a glamour, Harry had a good look around. The place had changed since his last visit at the height of Voldemort's power. It was much brighter, looked more appealing. The Fountain of Magical Brethren had changed. It was now a simple fountain, but it was good to see people still have put their money into it. Street Mungos would need it more than ever after the war. The glamour did its job, hiding his presence from the people, and he managed to walk without any interruptions to the office of the minister. The secretary checked his wand and him for influence from potions and curses. It was refreshing to see Kingsley take his security seriously. The secretary checked for his appointment under the name, Orion Tonks, and let him in. Kingsley's office was furnished to fit his personality. The walls were adorned with portraits of some of the previous ministers. Harry chuckled when he saw Fudge's portrait was missing. The carpet looked expensive and Harry could make out the bottle of F.I.R. whiskey and 2 glasses that were sitting on the table. Kingsley sat behind his desk, looking at a report in his hand before putting it down. "Hello, Harry. It's good to see you. You are looking better than the last time I saw you," said Kingsley. Harry chuckled. "Yeah, I know. These few days have been a gift." Kingsley gestured for him to sit down before his expression became serious. "Harry, I know it might be a bit early. But I need you to tell me about your year on the run. I may have sorted out the issue with the goblins, but only having in-depth knowledge about what you guys did will help put out any more fires in the future." Harry was hesitant, but he saw the point. He knew he would have to share it sooner or later. And thus began a tale that spanned for hours. Harry left no stone unturned. "First and foremost, how good is your knowledge about dark artifacts, Kingsley?" Kingsley raised an eyebrow. "Fairly good," and motioned for him to carry on. Voldemort, he took steps to ensure he did not die naturally. He made certain artifacts who had to be destroyed before he could be sent to the afterlife. Kingsley had a mask of indifference on his face, but Harry could see the gears turning inside his head. Would those be commit murder, capture a piece and hide it, dark artifacts? Harry was not surprised at all. Yes, that would be right. Kingsley drained his glass before pouring himself another one. That utter bastard. No wonder he was not human anymore. The lengths someone will go to achieve their means sometimes astounds me. Harry simply nodded. He made 6 of them. Me. And Dumbledore had already destroyed 2 before his death. The last year on the run, we tried to destroy the last 4. Hogwarts had 1 of them, so that's why we were there. But Harry, why not tell anyone? Me, Bill, Remus or Tonks? Why not ask our help in such a matter? Honestly, Kingsley, we were fools. We all were. Dumbledore told me to tell no one and I agreed to it without thinking about it. Bill is a curse breaker. You and Tonks were Aurors. It would have made things so much easier, but we just didn't. I don't have an excuse. Quote. Kingsley did not say anything. He knew he too had made similar mistakes in the past, on the words of Albus Dumbledore, and did not fault Harry for them. And so the discussion continued. The locket, Ron running away, the sword, Gringotts, Nagini and the diadem were all covered and discussed. Kingsley was a good listener. He never interrupted unless to clarify something and did not ask unnecessary questions. When Harry was finally finished with the battle, the office was left in silence. The bottle of whiskey lay half empty. No one said a word. The only noise was the chiming of the clock in the background. Harry had been reluctant to tell anyone about being the last Horcrux. It was something personal for him and only a few people knew about it, and he would have liked to keep it that way. Harry, on behalf of Magical Britain, I tell you that we are grateful. You helped bring down the oppressive regime and we at the Ministry of Magic give you our utmost thanks. You all will most likely be given the Order of Merlins, but that can be discussed later. Right now, my concern is the people themselves. This war has set Magical Britain back by years and we need people to understand, band together and move forward. That is the main reason I requested the interview. I want you to tell the people about the war and how we can avoid another one. Please don't take this as you sponsoring my post. I want you to be as blunt as possible. Harry thought about it a bit before he nodded. He and Andromeda had discussed this much in essence and come up with a conclusion. One way or the other, the word would come out in the open. This would be the best way to go about it. I agree, Kingsley. But I do have a few conditions. Let's make it a bit more about the Voldemort. I have enough understanding of his history to realize what made him what he was and why the system failed him. If people can understand that, we may prevent a similar thing from happening in the future. Kingsley nodded in reply and sent a missive to the reporter. So Harry, what have you decided in terms of politics? I know the Potters did not hold a seat, but the Blacks did. So that means you do have a vote then, after being invested of course. To be frank, I need every vote I can rig. Now to push forward legislation to prevent something like this from happening ever again. The members will only let away with so much as the temporary minister. Harry gave him a passive look. He knew this was coming. Both him and Andromeda had known this and discussed this at some length. I agree with that, Kingsley, and in time, I will take up my seat. However, due to my upbringing, I have not been taught about how the whole thing works, the customs and so on. I will need to learn them before I can join, lest I do more harm than good. That's fair. So how do you plan on going about it? Asked Kingsley. Harry blushed, and that surprised Kingsley a bit. I have a friend who was raised to be an heiress but due to circumstances, is not able to do so now. I was going to ask her for help. Initially, I wanted Andy to do it, but she told me she had been out of touch for some time, and when I told her about what I was thinking, she approved. Do I know this friend? Said Kingsley with an emphasis on the friend part. I don't think so. She was a classmate of mine in Hogwarts. Kingsley was a shrewd person and had prided himself on his analytical skills when he had been an Auror. Circumstances Harry had described for him had been far and few. There were only a few people who would fit into that criterion. He had extensively researched the political scene in the time he had spent as the interim minister. Gathering a vote, it suddenly struck him who might the person be. This, friend wouldn't happen to be a certain Daphne Greengrass, would she? Harry refused to meet his eyes, and that was confirmation enough for Kingsley, who decided against riling up the defeater of you-know-who further. The neutral faction, Actually, that's not a bad idea. It's very shrewd, politically, for you to act as a moderator between the dark and the light families. Dumbledore was openly light, and this caused a lot of families who did not agree with him to move to the neutral or the dark factions. Harry nodded but did not reply. Kingsley had been spot on with his assessment. All this aside, how is life now? How is the little tyke doing? A huge smile made its way to Harry's face as he began describing the grade 4 hurricane that was Teddy Black. It was close to an hour later when his secretary popped her head in and told him that the reporter was here. Suddenly, the discussion ceased, and both of the men adopted a passive expression. It was time for Magical Britain to know the truth. They say first impressions are worth a lot. To Harry, the first impression that Dari Quillfast portrayed was that of an owl. A pang of sadness hit him when he remembered his first friend, Hedwig, someone who had actually been with him through all the thick and thin. He would even to Allie get a new owl, but nothing would fill the void that Snowy Owl had left. Eventually, they got underway with the interview. His manner and his professionalism were unlike what Harry was used to from the press of Magical Britain, and this left him a bit flummoxed. Darius didn't interrupt or pester him or ask unnecessary questions, but most importantly, he was not interested in adding the Rita Skeeter brand of journalism. This was a massive plus in the eyes of Harry, who had been dealing with the bad press all his life. The interview lasted a sum total of 5 hours, a dozen rolls of parchment and the rest of the bottle of fire whiskey. Harry and Kingsley were happy with the outcome of the interview. They had got a lot of information across, and some of the things were shocking to even Kingsley. By the end of it, everyone had been tired, but Darius had promised to get the article ready for tomorrow's edition of Daily Prophet. Harry could not wait to see the reactions of everyone. Harry woke up the next morning with Teddy curled up right next to him. It never ceased to amaze him how Teddy could change his mood in a matter of seconds. Last night, he had come home tired and pissed off. He had forgotten to put his glamour on while leaving the ministry, leaving him surrounded by adoring fans and well-wishers. In hindsight, he had no reason to be angry at them. They had lived in fear for the best part of a year, not knowing when the Death Eaters would come knocking. Yet, he had not liked it one bit when he had been mobbed down by the people and had resorted to using the disillusionment charm to hide. He wasn't proud of it, but he did what he had to do. He had apparated home the first chance he got, and all he had wanted to do was rant to someone. Andromeda had given him one look and handed Teddy to him. Instantly, his whole demeanor changed. Teddy was awake, and like every time he was in Harry's arms, instantly morphed his hair and eyes to match Harry's. This quirk never seemed to amuse him. It always made him feel an instant connection with the boy. Teddy smiled and Harry smiled back. This was their dynamic, and he would not trade it for the world. Teddy had been particularly clingy last night and had made sure it was Harry who fed him, gave him a bath and put him to sleep. Andromeda had tried to, but Teddy had resorted to the one thing she hated the most, being licked on the face by the wolf form. She had immediately handed him back to Harry, who just laughed at the baby's antics and proceeded to put him to sleep. Harry got up and got ready for the day. Kingsley H. had suggested that he get his mail screened by the goblins now that the interview would become public. He had laughed and muttered, "Constant vigilance," before assuming a stony expression. Mad-Eye Moody had gone down fighting nearly a year before, but his mantra would forever stick with them. So, Harry had gone to Gringotts, and for a fee, the goblins had agreed to the effect. Thus, explaining the ban-ishing box that lay on the table next to him. Harry checked it but was not surprised to find it empty. It was too early in the morning for people to have read the paper and sent him mail. He hoped. After putting an alert charm on Teddy, Harry proceeded down for breakfast and was immediately provided a plate and some tea by Creature, along with the paper. Andromeda herself was immersed in her paper, and had merely looked up and given him a smile and wished him a good morning before going back to her reading. Darius, it seemed, had done a great job. Harry took a sip of his tea before deciding to read the interview. A huge picture of him and Kingsley looked back at him. Harry could make the bottle they had hastily hidden to prevent it from coming in the frame. Chuckling to himself, Harry carried on. Harry Potter speaks out about the war in his life on the run. You know who, a mystery solved. Readers of the Daily Prophet, it was yesterday only when I was summoned to the office of the minister for a press release. Hoping for it to be some new information regarding the upcoming trials or the renovation of damages caused due to the war, I hurriedly made my way over. I was thus shocked to see the man sitting next to the minister. None other than the savior of the wizarding Britain, the boy who lived, Harry Potter. It turns out, Harry Potter had finally decided to come out with his story during the war, and I was the lucky reporter who got the opportunity to do so. Below the conversation that ensued. HP, firstly, before we start, I would like to say a few things, and I would like if you printed them before everything else. I would like to thank my closest friends, my family, and all the people who came to Hogwarts to help in fighting against the forces of Lord Voldemort. It was I insisted I use the name and not the moniker. Your sacrifice and bravery will be remembered and honored by generation to come. I would also like to thank the people who defied him in their own way. Every time you did it, it proved to him that he did not have power over you, and that added to the resistance against him. Lastly, I have a request to make of you all. I have spent all my life under the scrutiny of the world, and now that I know I will be under it even more, I just request everyone to give me some space and peace. The war has not been good to me and many others involved, and you would have my eternal gratitude to me if I would be allowed to have my peace. DQ. So Mr. Potter, what did you do when on the run, and how did you make it out alive? HP, please just call me Harry. Mr. Potter makes me feel old. When the ministry fell after the death of Minister Scrimgeour, it was a Patronus message by out current minister, Kingsley Shacklebolt, that alerted me to the danger that I was in, and I, along with my closest friends, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, immediately went on the run. It was never fun, but we made it out alive in spite of a few close calls. As for what we did on the run, Voldemort had undergone some rituals that helped him survive the night in Godric's Hollow and needed to be undone before he could pass on to the afterlife. We spent the majority of the timing trying to overcome them, and it was while doing this that led to the battle against Tom's armies. The use of a name caught my eye. DQ, Tom. HP, yeah. Lord Voldemort's real name was in fact Tom Morvillo Riddle. He was a half-blood son of a squib and a muggle who attended Hogwarts in the 40s and was the head boy in his 7th year. His mother was a descendant from the Gaunt family, hence the entire heir of Slytherin propaganda. This reporter can indeed confirm that Mr. Potter is speaking the truth here. Tom Morvillo Riddle was indeed a student at Hogwarts and the son of Merope Gaunt and Tom Riddle Sr., a resident of Greater Hangleton and a muggle. Merope Gaunt was a member of the Gaunt family, notorious for their tradition of marrying their own cousins, which lead to mental instability and a gradual loss of magic powers. DQ, what do you mean by propaganda? HP, Tom Riddle was raised in a muggle orphanage and was not treated well due to his magical powers. Needless to say, he developed a hatred for the people who had tortured him in his youth. He, however, projected it in a way that would allow him to gain the most support in his quest for power. In his own words, there is no good or evil, only power and those afraid to use it. If he was so into the purity of blood, he he would not have left behind a path that is riddled with the blood of so many pureblood families like the Bones, Meadows, Potters, Longbottoms. McKinnons who were either completely wiped out or left to a few surviving members. Even the many pureblood families that followed him lost a lot of their members and are left almost on the brink of extinction. DQ, so what you mean to say is that it was not his nature, but how it was nurtured that made him who he was. HP, he was never a stable person, to begin with, but his UPB ringing did play a big factor in making him the man he became. He lost his humanity somewhere along the way and all that was left was something less than human in a lust for power. All we can do now is to learn from our mistakes and not dance to the tune of madmen in their pursuit of power. Harry remembered the scene perfectly. Darius had plowed on, but Kingsley had given him a look at the use of the term, madman, but had said nothing. DQ, so, what are your plans for the future, Mr. Potter? HP, right now, I just want to relax and spend my time as every 18-year-old should. I have inherited a seat on the Wizengamot from my godfather, Sirius Black, and I will probably take up the mantle he has left me some years later. Till then, I want to enjoy my life to the fullest. DQ, what would you say to the rumors that people have been campaigning to turn the day of the Battle of Hogwarts into a celebration? HP, Darius, I have not heard these rumors, but this is not something I can accept. On the other hand, I would like this day to be used to honor the dead, the many lives lost in the war, to remember your loved ones who sacrificed their lives for the peace of the future generation. They deserve to be honored for their sacrifice, and it behoves us to do so. Let this day serve as a reminder to the people about how power corrupts and its consequences. DQ, thank you for sitting with me, Mr. Potter. It was a pleasure. HP, it was a pleasure for me as well. Take care. Readers, I have personally checked all the facts that have been mentioned in this interview and I can attest for them to be true. It was shocking for me to see and realize what an 18-year-old boy, someone who had not even finished his schooling, had to go through to get us out of a bad situation. I just hope there isn't another one like this. I would also like to tell our reader that the late Sirius Black was found innocent of all charges that had been levied against him. In an enquiry by our own minister, it was revealed that Peter Pettigrew was indeed alive, and his body was recovered from the Malfoy mansion. It was Mr. Pettigrew who had been the secret keeper instead of Mr. Black, and the ministry has issued a posthumous pardon to him. Harry put down the paper and continued to sip his tea. It was finally out in the open. He could not wait to see the reactions of the public to the information that was released in the interview. He chuckled as he got up. He had a letter to write. Harry picked up the parchment and gave it a look over once again. Not his best work, he thought, but he had gotten his point across, he hoped. Most importantly, he hoped he had not managed to offend her in some way. Purebloods could be very nitpicky. Miss Greengrass, I hope to find you in the pink of your health. As you might know from our discussion a few days ago, I have a seat on the Wizengamot. You are also privy to the knowledge that being raised in a non-magical household has left me with an inadequate knowledge regarding the workings of the body. Not to mention the customs and traditions that have to be followed. Being raised the heiress of a family with a seat of the aforementioned body, I was hoping you could maybe take up a role as an advisor of mine in regard to the dealings with the governing body and pureblood customs in general. I know you have previous commitments to your work, but I would be willing to work around them should you choose as such. You would, of course, be compensated for the work done. Please reply to my inquiry as quickly as you could, as I would be in need of your services post-haste. Regards, Harry James Potter Black, Lord Black. Harry called for Creature to dispatch the letter off. Kingsley had mentioned that time would of the essence if he intended to get a head start on his duties if he was to attend the meeting of the Wizengamot next month. At the same time, people all over magical Britain were hanging on to every word of the article that had made the headlines that day in the Daily Prophet. The light supporters and neutrals were breathing the sigh of relief of war survived and were cursing the foolhardy of the Dark families. The Dark families reading the article were in a conundrum. They had been lied to, manipulated, and used for someone else's gain. They might have accepted him as their lord and champion of their cause, yet he had been fooling them all. They just wished they'd make it out of the coming Inquisition alive. At the Burrow, all the residents were crowded around the dining table, listening with solemn expressions as Hermione read out the article to everyone. Mrs. Weasley was crying in her handkerchief while Ginny and Fleur listened with stony expressions. Ginny was confused by the simple act of Harry going to the Ministry on his own to give an interview. Fleur had been there for Harry when he had been suffering from a moral dilemma and knew more about their quest than most people at the table and had managed to read between the lines of what Harry had tried to say. She smiled to herself. Harry, it seemed, had finally come out of his shell. Ron looked angry at something but kept his mouth shut. Daphne Greengrass put down the paper S. He had managed to get in the leaky cauldron. The first paper she picks up in oh so many months and Harry Potter has to go and knock the socks off everyone in magical Britain. A loud, damn, could be heard across the Davis household. Kingsley chuckled to himself. The article was the major topic of discussion in the Ministry today. Even though he had known about the waves it would make, it was still a sight to behold. Tons of tiny memos zoomed around the Ministry, with nothing but gossip and discussion regarding what was revealed in the article. In a single stroke of genius, Harry Potter had publicly denounced both Tom Riddle and Albus Dumbledore, and only the most intuitive of people would recognize it. It was this sort of people that ruled the world. Harry had spent a relatively quiet morning, which was something he had not expected to do after the article would be published. Spending some time with Teddy in the sunshine coupled with a good book had given him much-deserved peace and quiet, and it was only when his banishing box pinged did he decide to come back to the house and prepare himself for what was to come. The goblins had been told to remove anything with curses, howlers and most of the fan mail, which would be later sorted and sent to him. If a letter had arrived, it would have probably been from one of the very few people whom Harry had put on the allowed list. He was not surprised to see a letter with the familiar writing of Hermione Granger on it. Without even picking up the letter, Harry thought of Teddy's smiling face as he whispered, "Expecto Patronum." Surprisingly, a baby wolf, eerily similar to Teddy's animagus form, burst out of his wand. It glowed brightly and made its way towards the baby who was lying in his cot, before nuzzling him gently and looking up at Harry expectantly. With a message for Hermione that he'd be at the Burrow for supper that day, the Patronus bound off with Teddy carefully monitoring its progress, his eyes amber like the wolf. Folding open the letter, Harry sat down on the chair and began reading. "Harry, are you all right? What in Merlin's name made you go all alone to the Ministry and give an interview to a reporter of the Daily Prophet of all people? I thought you wanted some peace and quiet in your life. How do you expect to achieve that spilling the beans about the Dark Lord you recently defeated? While I agree with you that this knowledge is to be shared with the public to prevent the rise of another Dark Lord, don't you think you were a bit hasty? I would have liked if you took maybe me and Ron with you." The interview aside, things are looking up at the Burrow. Mrs. Weasley seems better and even smiled a bit when I read her the interview. That was a first since the war. Ginny's been quiet as well. She won't say much but she keeps looking at your photo wistfully. Ron, on the other hand, is quite mad at you. He thinks that you should have taken him and me alongside you so that we could have been part of the interview as well. He thinks you are trying to get back in the spotlight and holding him back. He was also angry and his contributions were not mentioned specifically in the interview. He is like the Tri-Wizard tournament all over again. He won't listen to me or Mr. Weasley about this. I think I might have made a big mistake in the Chamber of Secrets. Also, what's all this about being Lord Black and having a seat on the Wizengamot? I know it's a huge honor to be so, and I have a few points I think you could raise in there regarding the treatment of different creatures and other barbaric laws they ought to repel. Harry, please just come to the Burrow once. We all would love to have you, and I think it's time you sorted things out with a few people here. I don't want to seem pushy, but the more you delay it, the more damage it will cause. Your best friend, Hermione." Harry took a deep breath as he folded the letter back again and put it on the desk. Going to the Burrow, it seemed, would be a good decision after all. Daphne Greengrass just put down the letter she had received via owl from none other than Harry Potter. The first line of the letter itself had been proof enough for her that this was something bordering on official pureblood business. As she read on, it started making sense to her. When she had met Harry the day, she had expected him to stay in touch as friends, but this was not something she had envisioned. She liked her life here, but she knew that she wanted nothing more to go back to the wizarding world. Even the Davises would prefer that now that the threat had been dealt with. She needed to discuss this with both Mrs. D and Tracy before sending a reply back to Harry. Harry apparated to just outside the wards at the Burrow and was happy to see that they were still up. The post-war era was just in its infancy, and it would be a grave mistake to assume that the Death Eaters would give up this easily. Most of them were either dead, had been captured and sent to Azkaban, or waiting for their trials, but still, some would have escaped. It would not do well to take them lightly. The Longbottoms had made that mistake, and the poor souls were suffering for it to date. As soon as he made his way past the wards, the back door swung open to reveal Bill Weasley standing there with his wand outstretched. "Which elf was buried at my property by Harry Potter?" asked Bill. "Dobby," replied Harry, before sweeping Bill into a hug. Bill and Fleur had gone from being acquaintances to something more within a fraction of the time they had spent at Shell Cottage. Bill was funny, charming, intelligent, and treated Harry like a younger brother, while Fleur was feisty but never hesitated to show how much she cared for the ones she loved. They were the sort of couple Harry aimed to be. "How are you, Bill?" "It's so good to see you," said Harry. "You look well, Harry. Much better than the last time I saw you. That was of course when you were standing over the Dark Lord you had defeated." "I can't even imagine what the reactions of the womenfolk at Hogwarts were," replied Bill, causing Harry to break down in complete laughter. "Also, congratulations are in order. It's a big step, but I know you will excel at it. You are a good man," said Bill while thumping on the back. "For what?" replied Harry questioningly. He was confused about this as much as the next person. "I'll let Fleur explain that. Come on in." As Harry made his way inside the house, he could tell that it was looking different, yet essentially felt the same. The smell of Mrs. Weasley's cooking, the old magazines, and chess pieces littered around, and family clock ticking in the background. It all brought back memories. "Harry!" shouted someone before he was nearly engulfed in a bone-crushing hug by his bushy-haired friend. Harry, though, had managed to deftly sidestep her, before grabbing a hold of her before giving her a warm but solid hug. "It's good to see you too, my own. How have you been?" said Harry. "It's so good to see you, Harry. We all have been missing you a lot." "I have so much," was all Hermione could manage to say before a snarky voice shouted from the other side of the room. "Why are you here, Potter? Don't you have any more interviews to give?" said Ron Weasley, causing the whole household to fall into a silence which was uncommon to the Weasley household. "It's good to see you too, Ron," replied Harry cordially. He had no intention to get into a fight here. You defeat one Dark Lord and the fame gets to your head. We helped as well. Me and Hermione were with you through all those years and during the war, and all we get is a "thank you family" in the interview. We were your friends, and this is how you treat us," shouted back Ron. "Ronald Bilious Weasley, have you gone mad? Do you even realize what nonsense you are sprouting? Apologize to Harry right now," shouted Hermione. All this commotion had caused the rest of the family to come to the room. Harry could see they did not look well compared to last year, but looked much better than what they had looked before the battle. Peace was good for everyone while war caused problems for all. Ginny was looking at the scene carefully. While she had seen Ron moaning and mumbling about his since morning, Harry's reaction was really putting her off. By now, she would have expected him to shout back, probably throw a curse or two. Yet, he stood there, looking at Ron right in the eye. She had seen him fight the Dark Lord, yet he had never looked more intimidating. "Will you calm down for a second, Ron, and let me tell you why I did what I did, or do you want to continue to shout at me, in which case I will take my leave? I came here to meet people I considered family to me, not to withstand the temper tantrum of a man acting like a baby," said Harry before turning to Mrs. Weasley and giving her a hug. "I am really sorry, Mrs. Weasley, but I think I am not in the mood to be here right now. I will come back some other time when it would be more preferable. Please take of yourself." Harry turned and marched back out of the house before a shout from Ginny made his stop and turn. "Harry, wait a moment. I need to talk to you. Ron's being an idiot, I know. Let's take a walk around the orchid." Harry nodded and waited for her to join him. She had expected Harry to take her hand but was surprised when he did not do so. Her heart cracked a bit. She had been fearing this moment for some time, but now it seemed it would come to pass. "So Ginny, what do you want to talk about?" said Harry in a neutral tone. This new Harry was putting Ginny off by the minute and she did not know how to react to it. Harry, I know you said that we would see about us after the war was over. After Riddle was dead. It's done. The war's over. So let's discuss. Before we go any further, Ginny, let me ask you this. Do you have any dreams or ambitions? What do you expect from a relationship between me and you? This threw Ginny off completely. She knew Harry used to look at her on the Marauders map every day. Ron had told her that. They had even kissed before he had gone into the Forbidden Forest. So where was this coming from, she wondered. I don't know, Harry. My dream was always to play for the Harpies. I had hoped to go back to Hogwarts for my last year and play Quidditch to the best of my abilities before joining the league. As for what I want from us, I was hoping we could spend some time together, go to some of the parties and function you would be invited and we would be back to where we were before the war, said Ginny, turning towards Harry as she spoke. Her heart broke further when she saw Harry shake his head side to side. I'm really sorry, Gin, but this is not what I want. I know you like your attention and all, but what I want now after the war is to stay away from everything. I doubt I will be going back to Hogwarts. I have other responsibilities now that I did not have previously which take precedence in my life, said Harry. Ginny had started shedding tears now. Harry did not want to do this, but he knew Ginny was persistent. If he did not break it off now, she would not let it go. I know you are a good person, Gin. But the war has changed me. I am not the same man I was before, and to tell you the truth, I do not feel for you the same way that you do for me, and I do not want to do that you. It would be unfair, said Harry, managing to look at Ginny, who was crying even more now. But Harry, we had such a good time together. We worked so well. Why can't you just give it a try? Managed to mutter a sobbing Ginny. Gin, what we had was a whirlwind. Emotions were high and we got carried away. Aside from Quidditch, we do not have a lot in common. I do not even know that much about you. We were so concerned about being together that we did not even take time to know each other for the people we truly are. Quote, Ginny tried to stop the flow of tears but only managed to increase them further. But Harry, ever since you saved me from the chamber, I thought we had a connection. That we could end up together. I tried to get to know you better, even dated boys just so I would not be a stuttering mess around you. You cannot do this to me. I am really sorry, Gin, replied Harry, only to be slapped hard by the redhead, who then ran back to the house, still crying her eyes out. His heat stung and he noticed that the weather had suddenly become cloudy. He had hoped that this visit would not go like this, and yet, his worst fears had come true. He just hoped he did not regret this in the future. Sighing to himself, he apparated away. It had been a long and emotional day and all he wished was to lie in his bed and sleep, but he was Harry Potter. His luck was the laughingstock of the whole of magical Britain. Lying waiting from him, was a letter from Daphne. Lord Black. To say I was surprised when I received this correspondence from you would be an understatement. I have gone through your proposal, and after seeing your stance on a few of the topics in the society as per the interview of yours that was published in the Daily Prophet, I would be happy to be of assistance to you. I, however, have a few conditions to which I hope you would be willing to consider. Firstly, as you know, I was disowned by my family, unwillingly. As of right now, I have no standing in the Wizarding world and am equivalent to a squib or a muggleborn. To prevent undue exploitation of myself, I was hoping you would be willing to make a part of your house. As a member of the House Potter Black, I would be oath-bound by magic to not reveal any secrets that you would mention to me. It would also prevent anyone from trying to establish any sort of claim over me, as I would be under your protection. Most of all, it would allow me to come back into society so that I could meet my parents and sister after so many months. Secondly, I was hoping you could add the Davis family as a vassal to your house. It is an outdated tradition, but it would help protect both Tracy and her mum as they are the only ones left from their house. Doing so would allow them to continue to do their business as well as expand it into the wizarding world and make it legitimate. I know I am requesting a lot, and even if you do not accept my requests, I would be willing to head your request. Any details you would like to discuss could be done in person. Regards, Daphne Davis. P.S. If you have any doubts, I know Mrs. Tonks would be able to explain them to you. Also, the meeting in person is an invite for dinner for everyone, including Mrs. Tonks and of course, Teddy. Please let me know by all your reply. I know it looks like I am asking for a lot, but please explain my situation to Mrs. Tonks and she will be able to help you understand my predicament. Daphne. He had a lot to think about and he would surely need counsel from both Andromeda and Professor McGonagall on this. As he started to drift to sleep, his last thoughts were those the meeting he had had with Daphne at that cafe, with Teddy in her arms with amethyst eyes and messy, black hair. This had been his pet project for some days now. Hallows or Horcruxes. He pondered this once before, when deciding what to do in the war against Voldemort, and needless to say, had gone with his gut and made the right decision. Now, it was a matter of professional interest. He was used to Hermione being the one to do all the research for him, but now the trend would have to change. He had a lot of new responsibilities and this one question had been nagging him for the past few days. How had he survived that night in the Forbidden Forest? According to Dumbledore, it had been due to the fact that Harry had been a Horcrux and the piece of Voldemort's soul that had latched onto him had been allowed to pass on. But had he been a Horcrux in the first place? There had always been a loophole in that theory. He had been told in his return, his mother sacrificing herself to save him. How could Voldemort's soul have survived all these years attached to him then, if his mother's protection had been active? Quirrell had found it out the hard way that Voldemort's soul was so tainted that even the act of touching Harry had been a mistake. How then, would a piece of his soul remain attached? From what he had read or seen about the Horcruxes, he had never truly behaved like one. Granted, he was the only sentient one, but hadn't the diary tried to possess Ginny and consume its soul? Shouldn't that have happened to him as well if he was a true Horcrux? He was sure Voldemort had not performed a ritual that night at the time of his mother's death. Was this another one of Dumbledore's mistakes? Was this the reason Dumbledore had never trained him, cause he had been expected to die? This line of thought had answered more questions for him that provide answers. The next night, he had gone against his decision of a few nights ago and apparated himself to the Forbidden Forest and relocated the resurrection stone that he had dropped there. He did not feel anything different, with the cloak and the stone in his hand and the cloak around him. He made his way over to a clearing and moved his hand as per the instructions in Beetle the Bard, and lo behold, Nymphadora Tonks appeared. Now that he was in the right frame of mind, he could feel the magic swirl around him as the shade took shape and spoke in the voice of Tonks. She wanted to know all about her little boy and Harry obliged. She, however, answered some of his questions very vaguely. The pattern continued. James Potter, Lily Potter, Sirius Black were called summoned and Harry had a chat with all of them. They were who they said they were, that was for sure, but Harry still felt something odd. He had felt like this before once, but he couldn't put his wand on it. It had taken him the best of 2 days to remember what. The mirror of Arised. This felt something similar. The shades like the images he had seen in the mirror. They wanted to hear what he wanted them to, they knew about their lives what he knew about them. Why would his mother's shade not know about how many newts she had? The stone produced shades that were a representation of his desires of them. What sort of parents encouraged their child to walk to his own death? Why would a mother, who had sacrificed her life to protect her child and provide him with a protection, tell him to calmly walk to her killer and sacrifice himself to save people who treated him like dirt one moment and a king the other? His revelation produced another slew of questions. Had Dumbledore known about this? He had effectively shortened his life to talk to his sister apparently when he had put on the ring with a withering curse on it. Another chink in the armor that was the image of the Albus Dumbledore. The Elder Wand was just that, another wand. A wand enchanted to increase the power and magical output of a person, the true wielder. Being the unbeatable wand was a myth, considering it always passed on from one to another based on defeating the current owner. The cloak, Harry mused, was probably another heavily enchanted magical object. A cloak, designed to last longer than the normal ones made from demiguise hair, that had a lifetime of 15 years. Whatever they were, the Hallows were not gifts from death. They were a curse, to say the least. He was probably the first person to unite the Hallows for a long time and had probably figured out their secrets to a certain extent. Yet, he was no closer to finding the answer to his questions. This was not something he was willing to involve others into. Very few people knew in its entirety about what had happened that day in the forest. Kingsley, Professor McGonagall and Andromeda Tonks were the only ones. He had not even told his friends about it, though he thought Hermione had probably figured it out. She was a smart witch but sometimes lacked common sense. Some of the decisions they had made during the war still haunted him to this day. Had he been more open with the others in the Order, maybe there would have been more survivors after the war. Maybe the search would have been smaller. Maybe their troubles would have been fewer. By some fluke of magic, he was alive. And by Merlin, he would make the best of it. Harry woke up feeling completely refreshed the next morning. The last day had been an emotional roller coaster for him. The Weasleys were the closest thing to a family he had in the whole world and he would have loved to spend some more time with them. Between Ron's moronic behavior and breaking up with Ginny, he knew that he had not done them justice at all. Yet, some part of him wanted to wait and see how it played out. Mrs. Weasley was someone who had never openly said anything but had been very happy with the growing relationship between Harry and Ginny, and now, Harry feared her reaction to the breakup. She was already suffering from trauma due to the war and he hoped she didn't end up doing anything too drastic. He still longed to talk to both Bill and Fleur. Bill's comments had been quite cryptic, and as someone who had been kept in the dark for a long period of his life, he was itching to find out about it. Ginny had inherited her temper from her mother, so he was expecting a howler as a minimum on that front. Ron was someone he had expected to behave a bit like this but hoped that would not happen. Ron was his best friend, his first friend, and for someone who had been raised in an environment like he was, that mattered a lot. However, as he had gotten older, he had seen and faced horrors most men didn't even dream of. This had caused him to mature emotionally much more than his peers. Ron, on the other hand, seemed to have not matured at all. While Harry had hoped that being on the hunt would help him develop as a man, it seemed as Ron's teenage emotions had reared their ugly head. Luckily, Hermione was with him at the burrow and Harry knew she was the only one that could make him understand what was happening. Harry got up and went about his daily routine before going about and checking his banishing box. He still had a huge list of letters from people he had no intention of reading. The only letter he had any interest in reading was from Neville. He knew that Neville would be a lord in the Wizengamot in his own right. But this looked more like a letter you would send to a friend. He was really thankful for that. 2 weeks into this society thing and he was already laden with a lot of obligations and work. Harry, I hope you are recovering well after the battle. I read the interview you gave to the Daily Prophet and I think it was a great thing you did. Like the Sorting Hat used to say, we need to be united to move forward, and that can only be done if we learn from our past mistakes. I am doing well. My gran was one of the people who passed away in the battle. She got cursed by an unidentified Death Eater but managed to defeat Jugson before that. I just hope she is proud of me. I am currently living with the Abbotts. Hannah did not attend last year due to her being a half-blood and Susan because, well, the Bones were hated by the DEs. I also read that you were made Lord Black thanks to your godfather. As you may know, me and Susan will also be joining the Wizengamot in the next meeting. I was hoping we could meet before that and discuss a few things. I will be waiting for your reply. Hannah and Susan will also do their Newt studies with tutors alongside me, as I will mostly repeat the year with them as well. Between the personal obligation, I don't think I will manage a full-time schedule like the ones Hermione makes. Have you given a thought to your Newts? Hannah H. wants me to ask you if you guys would be interested in joining us for the studies. Give my love to Hermione and punch Ron in the face for me. Hermione may have mentioned what happened to me. I am really sorry, mate. Yours truly, Neville Longbottom. P.S. Yes, me and Hannah are dating. Last year, it seemed had done Neville a world of good. The style of the letter itself oozed a sense of confidence that had been lacking in the Neville before last year. The fact that he managed to ask his longtime crush Hannah out would be another good indicator. As soon as Harry was about to send a reply to Neville, a bird-like Patronus burst into the room. This was Bill's Patronus, Harry was sure of it. The bird spoke out in Bill's voice. I'm sorry about yesterday, Harry. We have a few things to discuss. No, you are not in any trouble. Meet me and Fleur at Leaky for lunch at 1. Harry did not even hesitate before sending back his positive reply with his own Patronus, making a special request to get a private meeting room. He had been putting off going to Gringotts for some time as well. Might as well do it when he was going to Diagon Alley anyways. After a hearty breakfast and putting Teddy down for one of his multiple daily naps, Harry sat down with Andromeda to discuss the letter Daphne had sent him. He was not truly surprised by what she told him, but it still felt odd hearing it all. He knew about the Peking order based on blood, with Muggleborn at the bottom of it, and yet, people who had been disowned were treated even worse. They were considered the original blood traitors, not worthy of their family magic. Even though Daphne had not been stripped of her family magic, she was for all intent and purposes not a Greengrass anymore. Because she had been disowned to prevent a magic contract as the eldest Greengrass child from taking effect, she could not assume that position again and thus was considered a betrayer in the magical world. For her to be welcomed back into the wizarding world, she would have to be accepted as a part of some prominent family. The Davises could not offer her that, and if she was to approach some other family, they would demand her marry a member of the family or become an official concubine along with some token akin to a dowry. Andromeda told him she had not faced this issue because she was soon married and part of the Tonks family. Daphne W. as in effect asking this of him to prevent herself from becoming a kept woman of some family and hoping Harry accepted her as a member of the family. By bringing the Davis into it as well, either as a member or a part of the family, it would effectively convert the family status to a clan. A clan, she explained, was like the assimilation of multiple families. They could continue to exist as separate bloodlines but would be under the headship of the clan leader or head of the first family, which would be the Blacks in this case. Business in the wizarding world was another thing that Harry was unfamiliar with, and Andromeda had to explain that to him as well, freely cursing the tomfoolery of Albus Dumbledore. An important member of the society, who would have great pull in the world had not been educated in the ways the system worked. Maybe, she thought, it was a way to maintain his control over Harry. Whatever the reason might have been, she would have to remedy that. Apparently, all big businesses were owned by major families. The Blacks owned a lot of land in Diagon and Nocturne alleys, and their primary source of income was revenue from the places. The Greengrasses owned malt, IPLE greenhouses and potion ingredient farms, while the Longbottoms had livestock and fisheries. Small businesses would thus use the bigger families as patrons, giving them a cut of profit, while Mackin use of their influence to boost business or make laws that would increase profit. It was similar to lobbying, but many families bought stakes in such businesses, thus making the whole thing legal. He Davises were effectively offering him a partnership in the business. While it would affect their sales in the Muggle world, seeing Harry Potter use or endorse their products would be a huge boost for sales. From what Andromeda could make out, Harry was sure to accept the request. Even though he had battled a lot of his demons, he still had a white knight complex, born out of a lifetime of people being treated like the hero and savior. This was his first major decision as Lord Black, and Andromeda was genuinely curious to see how he handled it. He also told her about the letter from Neville. While she had not known the boy, she knew Augusta Longbottom quite well, and if had managed to pass on only a tiny bit of her political acumen to her grandson, he would be a major player in the political scene for years to come. Add to that Harry Potter and his fame, the boys could in effect rule magical Britain. Suddenly the bell chimed. Harry decided to leave for his meeting with Bill Weasley. Not before giving Teddy a kiss on the cheek and a peck on Andromeda on her forehead. She had known the day that he walked into her life, that she was taking care of two boys instead of one now. If she was to be fair, she had needed his presence the same way he needed hers. He had only known a family who took great pleasure in making him suffer. The Weasleys were close, but still, she could tell they were, after all, his friend's family. To him, she was the mother. He was learning how to walk in a pureblood work from her while she was a mother again, raising two boys. And she couldn't be prouder of the man he was becoming. Harry apparated to the incoming apparition point at the edge of Diagon Alley, under a glamour of course. It was still early to be going out in public without a disguise. As he walked over to the pub and asked for the room in Bill Weasley's name, he was directed to a room at the end that looked better than the ones he had seen on his previous visits. Sitting inside were Bill and Fleur, having their lunches. After sharing pleasantries and ordering a pint for himself, Harry sat down and put up some privacy wards. "Hey Bill, Fleur. It's so nice to see you guys." "Hello, Harry. I'm sorry about yesterday. We all knew he was sulking a bit and yet we should have made an effort to dissuade him of his notions about you." "That should have been a conversation and not a shouting match," replied Bill, who looked solemn. "It's all right, Bill. I could tell from my own letters that Ron was not taking it that well. It's just that I had come there to explain things to everyone and he did not let me do that and I kind of lost it. I should have been more mature about it," said Harry, shaking his head left and right. "Speaking of being mature, Ginny told us about your conversation as well. The Weasley household was not a happy one yesterday," said Fleur sadly. As an outsider, she knew how well-knit the Weasley family was and could only guess if certain lines would be drawn. "I know, ma sir. I know. All throughout my 6th year at Hogwarts, I pined for her, you know. I had a monster in my chest that roared every time I saw her with Dean. Then when I finally got a chance to spend some time with her, I was so happy. We'd walk all around the school, talk about Quidditch, I'd help her revise for her tests, and we'd make out a bit." Harry blushed, not looking Bill in the eye. "But then I was at your wedding and I saw how much you loved each other and how much you meant to each other and I said to myself, do I have that with Ginny?" Granted, I had not spent much time with her till then and I was going to embark on a life-threatening mission, and it was at that moment that I realized I had not been living my life. Everything and everyone had been second in my life to Voldemort and my quest to stay alive. If I somehow managed to survive this war, I had nowhere to go to. I would be a ship without a paddle. Harry had started to tear up by then and found himself engulfed in a warm embrace from Fleur while Bill looked on. This was exactly like Shell Cottage had been. While Ron and Hermione had been sleeping at night, Harry had sat down with Bill, Fleur and some fire whiskey. "You guys remember the map I showed of Hogwarts to you, right? I used to watch Ginny on it a lot. Whenever she was with Neville or Luna, I felt happy cause I knew she was safe, but there were times when I wondered how different my life would have been if I hadn't been in a relationship with her. The answer, sadly, was nothing. I would be the same person regardless. I knew from the beginning I was probably not going to survive this war until that day in Shell Cottage. I felt no need to." Fleur sniffled back some tears and cleared them away with a napkin. "You know, Harry, fatherhood suits you." Harry stared at her in amazement. "What?" Fleur chuckled. "You know that Harry, we Veela have a more intimate connection with magic than most witches or wizards." Harry laughed, as he remembered a previous conversation. "You know, goblins told me the same thing about themselves." Fleur gave him a glare. "I would thank you not to compare me with goblins. While they are an intelligent and warrior race, they have nothing on the majesty of the Veela. Every time I met you, every time I tried to feel your emotions, you were always in turmoil. Your emotions were like a volcano, always bursting at the surface, looking for a way out. Now, it's like the calm ocean breeze. Peaceful, gentle, but it has an underlying tone of power to it." Harry mused on what she had said. It was true. Ever since Voldemort had died, he felt more in control of his emotions. He was calmer and he was not rushing headfirst into decisions. Maybe he had been a Horcrux and the presence of a tainted soul had been affecting him somehow. "Still does not tell me how you know about my fatherhood." Fleur smiled. "Silly, women have their secrets which they don't share." Bill chuckled. "Don't be a prude, love. Fleur here works as an enchantress and a financial expert for the goblins, and guess who got handed a new assignment when the Black Vaults were opened again? They knew about your friendship since the Tri-Wizard tournament and felt that if it was your vaults she was handling, she would be motivated to produce the best result, generating more gold and providing profit for everyone. Just for your peace of mind. We have not shared it with anyone. It is, of course, your personal matter and is at your discretion to be shared." "Thank you. That means a lot to me, you guys." Bill gave a look to him that seemed on the border of being a question when suddenly something clicked. "It was Teddy, wasn't it?" Harry gave him a nod but did not say anything while Fleur just looked at him. "Bill?" she inquired. Harry said he had nothing to live for until the day at Shell Cottage. It was the day Remus came and told him that he'd be the godfather of the child. Fleur looked on as comprehension dawned on her face. Bill's right. You know. Let me tell you what happened while we were in hiding. And then, he explained the whole Horcrux thing to both Bill and Fleur. To say they were angry was an understatement. They were royally pissed. Bill had dealt with Horcruxes before and Fleur had known how to deal with the goblins about stolen, hidden dark artifacts. Once again, Harry cursed his own thick-headedness. I was the last Horcrux. That was my connection to Voldemort. Fleur looked at him with shock in his eyes when suddenly Bill had his wand out, whipped it at Harry, and cast a complex enchantment all the while, chanting in Greek. It's gone now, Harry. That means, he stopped right there when his eyes widened, and he looked straight at Harry in the eye and said, you got hit with an AK. Yes. Bye. LL flinched while Fleur couldn't take her eyes off him. The man in front of her had walked willingly to his parents' murder and had sacrificed himself for them. She could hold it in anymore. She burst into tears again while Bill looked on with a sad expression. It wasn't Ginny I thought of when I got hit. I thought I loved her. It was the image of Teddy that flashed in front of my eyes. I knew Remus and Tonks had just died. I could not just leave him alone. I had to come back. I had to come back for him. He started sobbing unashamedly while Fleur just held on to him, his head in her lap as she caressed his hair gently. Bill looked down at the pair and saw a man truly broken. A man who had lost everything and had simply desired for a reason to live. The room was shrouded in silence for some time while its inhabitants didn't move a muscle. Fleur, cradling the young man in her arms, comforting him as an elder sister would. Bill Weasley sat next to her, rubbing the back of the man in his wife's lap. Harry Potter had been crying his eyes out. A life full of loneliness, mistreatment, and life-threatening instances had taken his toll on him, yet he had soldered on. He had cried when Sirius had died. To weep for the closest link he had to his parents and life they could have spent together had it not been for the cruelty of fate. This time, however, he cried for himself. He cried for the bad hand that he had been dealt by fate the day he was born. He cried for a childhood he would not even wish on his worst enemies. He had shaken his head like a tired dog on that thought. Tom Riddle had arguably had a better childhood than him. He cried for all the times he had feared for his and survived, only to be sent back with a few words of encouragement. No one had asked how he felt, and inquired whether he would need any help recovering from the incidents all throughout his Hogwarts schooling. Dumbledore had had a weird way of showing whatever emotion he felt for Harry. Killed a teacher by his bare hands, house points. Killed a basilisk with a sword, with poison seeping through his veins. Hot chocolate and sleep. This was not even counting the emotional and mental trauma borne out of your parents' killer comparing himself to you. Saved your godfather, falsely imprisoned for 13 years from the foulest creatures to roam on Earth, an empty promise to find a way to free him. The horrors of the Tri-Wizard Tournament. Having his blood taken for the resurrection of said parents' killer and the murder, in front of his eyes, of a good friend, a blanket ban on communication with the outside world. Granted the Umbridge thing was his own doing, but had Dumbledore been open to him about the scar and the ability of Voldemort to utilize the scar and send him visions, Sirius might have been alive. Death of Godfather. Back to the people who had made his life hell. In some ways, he had been bred for war. He had learnt to kill and get over it himself. He had been taught to have compassion and kindness towards others and yet had received so little of them in return. Whether he was supposed to survive or not was a moot point. He had learnt to deal with his emotions by repressing them. To the point that they had burst out when he had been vulnerable and had always, till not led to disastrous consequences. It was after some time, that Harry gained back his focus on reality. He thanked Bill and Fleur for all their help and all he got was a kind smile in return. As they ate their meals in silence, Harry thought about how his life had changed and how grateful he was, for all his friends who had stuck by him. Fleur soon struck up a conversation about children and rewarded with a blinding smile from Harry in return. A good hour was spent recounting adventures of Teddy who listened to his stories with a hungry expression, and Harry was not surprised when Fleur accidentally let slip that with the war over, she and Bill were trying for a baby. Both Bill and Harry had sported huge blushes at that point. Harry could let this go easily though and had cheekily replied, "While it's good to hear my brother getting some action, I'm happier to hear about the friends Teddy is going to have soon." He was slapped on the back of his head by Bill, but Fleur just laughed at this. This one would as a win in his book. A finished meal was followed by dessert and coffee before Harry decided to make his way to Gringotts. While Fleur apparated back home, Bill decided to walk to the bank with Harry. He had some papers pick up there. While it was an unlikely excuse, Harry was glad for the company. Walking down Diagon Alley, Harry was reminded of his first trip here. Ollivanders, Hedwig, and the goblins. So much of what happened that day had affected his life years later. On their way, they stopped at the Weasleys' Wizarding Wheezes. Bill had told him that George had shifted back to the flat above the shop a few days ago and he was living with Angeline, Alicia and Lee Jordan right now. They all had plans to help with the shop except Alicia, who had an offer to professional Quidditch. His old housemates were happy to see Harry, even if he was still under a glamour. George looked a bit under the weather. But Harry was happy to see him out and about. George apologized to him for Ron's behavior and was happy to see that he had tried to let Ginny down gently. They all loved Ginny, but she did have a Weasley temper which no one wanted to cross. They also talked about him being a silent partner, which shocked Harry. He had given them the money because it was the right thing to do. Oh, and spending that money would have been a constant reminder of Cedric's death. This had been his first investment of sorts, and he was more than happy with the returns. George also encouraged him to take up his marauder roots and help him with business ideas. While this statement had reminded Harry of the losses he had faced, it was also a great motivation to move on and live the legacy of his parents, his godfather and Remus. He promised himself that he would raise Teddy the right way. The visit to the goblins was short but sweet. He got the money from the vault he had wanted and also Mana G'd to get into the Black family vault and have a look around. He took some family heirlooms that he thought either Andromeda would like to have or could be used to decorate the house. Exiting the ban, Kay and thanking Bill profusely for all his help today, Harry apparated back to Grimmauld Place. Harry was an emotional wreck. He would never deny that, but thanks to a stellar upbringing, his physical growth was not the only thing that was stunted. The days after the war that had been chock full of emotions and unexpected developments. So, for once, when he actually had time for himself, he let loose like he had never done before. It was cathartic yet, something which did not feel normal to him. Recently, he had begun spending such moments with Teddy, coming to a simple conclusion that the little fellow had a beautiful way of making everything about him and thus, helping him forget about his problems. It was a temporary solution, true, but a solution nonetheless. From changing his hair to making faces, Teddy was becoming a master at pulling your attention to himself. Harry just hoped that this was only a phase and he would not be chasing away girls with a stick in the near future. Bill L. had not mentioned much about the state of the Weasley household but just given him a basic rundown. He was shocked that he had not gotten another letter from Hermione but happy that he did not have one from Mrs. Weasley. Speaking of letters, he had planned to reply to Neville's letters tomorrow. While he had not given much consideration to his NEWTs, it would be a good thing to finish his studies. He had no intention of going back to Hogwarts unless it was to meet Professor McGonagall, and the idea of studying with private tutors seemed like the most likely option. He wanted to ask Tracy and Daphne as well if they would like to join them. It seemed like the logical thing to do. While he planned on asking Ron and Hermione as well, he didn't want to think about how they would react to it. While Ron would probably grumble about studies and not needing them for the future, Hermione would probably tell him to go back to Hogwarts or like a woman on a mission in these sessions. Daphne or Tracy on the other hand would immediately jump on the opportunity. Whatever the situations, they were Slytherins after all. He was suddenly reminded of the dinner invitation for tonight. While he had principle decided what he was going to do, it was still going to take some research to get it done properly. And while Harry himself was not the biggest stickler for traditions, something's had to been done properly. It was a matter of someone's life in question here after all. And if there was something he had learnt from his life, it was that every breath you drew was precious and not to be taken for granted. Fate was a fickle bitch after all. Harry, Andromeda and Teddy took Elf Express to the address that he had been sent by the Davises. Teddy was a bit young to be going about by aperitif. And Harry had no intention of exposing Teddy to it before it was necessary. On Andromeda's suggestion, he had picked out a good elf wine as a gift for the hosts. He did not have much knowledge about spirits in the wizarding world, with his experience being limited to butterbeer and fire whiskey, but Andromeda had insisted on the importance of a lord knowing his wine, something which had him laugh quite a lot. While Harry was dressed in traditional head of house robes, Teddy was wearing one of the onesies they had picked out of the girls' store. As if the robes were not a clear enough indication, the choice of clothing for the little boy would surely be. They were met at the door by Mrs. Davis. Belinda Davis had been firstie when Andromeda Tonks had been in her last year at Hogwarts, but he had been a well-known member of the Slytherin house. The Blacks were vicious, and the news of what happened to men who rubbed the black women the wrong way were common in Hogwarts. She thus had been completely surprised by Daphne's description of her when they had met at the shop. Curtsying, she said, "Lord Black, welcome to our home. May I present my daughters, Tracy Davis and Daphne Davis." Harry was not surprised to hear Daphne be called Davis. She had of course replied to his letter with that name. What he did not miss, however, was the smile that adorned her face on being referred to as Belinda's daughter. "Lady Davis, it is a pleasure to be here. May I introduce Andromeda Tonks and my son and heir, Theodore Black," said Harry. Teddy, up to his usual tricks, turned his hair like Daphne's. He had taken a shining to her. Harry mused. "Lady Davis was my mother, Lord Black. Please call me Belinda or Mrs. D, like the girls do." "Belinda it is. Mrs. D was my maternal aunt and not of the people I care about. It would be a disservice to call you that. However, I insist you call me Harry. While I may like being a lord, I am but a young man and cannot let this all get to my head." Mrs. D chuckled but nodded to him, nonetheless. She wished Tracy had such maturity. While Tracy cooed over the baby, the guests were ushered in. While the wine bottle was opened and served, they talked on inconsequential things. Andromeda and Belinda talked about their days at Hogwarts and a lot of things they got up to. It was a good period of reminiscence for them. The teens, however, crowded the young boy and played with the toys that Harry had brought alongside him. They could talk about business later. Daphne and Belinda had been intelligent to know the meaning of the head of house robes, and this had quelled their fears. This was more of a get-to-know-you dinner than anything else. Daphne let loose a breath she had been holding in since morning. Soon, dinner was served, and the conversation shifted to food. While Daphne and Tracy weren't much of a cook, Belinda took pleasure in what she cooked, and she was surprised to find an equally passionate soul in Harry. To her, he seemed awfully more knowledgeably about cooking than any 17-year-old should, and when asked about it merely shrugged and said, "My aunt used to make me cook." Everyone knew there was more to it, but no one ventured to ask more. Teddy had chosen that perfect moment to make his move. Scooping his hands towards the mashed potato, he managed to grab a handful, only to have it vanished by a scolding Harry, who picked up the bowl and put it away from the boy's reach. Hair turned red, Teddy closed his eyes. Suddenly, the bowl towards Harry and splat, his face was covered completely with mashed potatoes. The sight of the savior of wizarding Britain, with mashed potato dripping down his nose, simply brought the house down. Teddy joined in on the laughter, and Harry just looked around the table at everyone. This was what he had always wanted. Sitting on a table with people he cared about, having a nice dinner, without a care for the world outside. He finally felt normal. This was what he had fought for. This was what he had survived hell for. He was finally here, and he wasn't going to let this go. Dessert was served afterwards, and Harry was surprised to find treacle tart there. When sporting a look of disbelief on his face, Daphne had simply replied, "We are Slytherins. We know our opponents' weaknesses," which had everyone break down into purlie of laughter again. With the food finished, everyone had retired to the lounge to have their coffee, and suddenly, you could feel the atmosphere become tense. It was time. "Miss Daphne Davis, I have gone over your requests in the reply to my letter asking for assistance, and I find them to be acceptable. After the family ritual is done, you would become a member of the House of Black, provided the family magic accepts you. Mrs. Davis, your family will be accepted as a member of the clan Potter Black. You and daughter will become a vassal to the Black family, with me as a lord. All I ask of you all is to be a patron of Davis clothing in the wizarding world. I would be a good move to protect your interest, as well as me being a patron would be good for business." "I agree," said Daphne. We agree, replied Tracy and her mum. Good. Creature, said Harry, when the old elf popped in. Get me the scrap of paper on my desk and the box lying next to it, please. Yes, master, replied the elf before popping away and returning with the requested items. Thanks, creature. I will probably have Winky come in once we are done here. You can have the night off. Thanks, kind master. Creature wishes you a good night. Night, creature. This had been one of the weirdest human-elf conversations that everyone in the room had witnessed, and yet, no one was surprised by it. Andromeda was used to it, and the mere fact that he was helping them was good enough for the Davises to see what kind of a person Harry was. As Harry looked down and went thought the proper procedure on the acceptance of vassals, Teddy spent the whole time in Daphne's lap, playing with her hair while Tracy looked on. As Daphne lay in her bed that night, she could do nothing but wonder about how the night had gone better than anything she could have ever expected. The Davises had been accepted as vassals while she had been made a member of the family, with the blessing of the matriarch, Andromeda. While Harry was the lord, she would be the one responsible for her needs. A detailed discussion had followed suit about immediate plans for the future and how they featured in them. Daphne was to be an advisor, a teacher and a confidant, all rolled in one. While she had been raised to be an heiress one day, Harry Potter would have to be something more. She pitied the poor boy. Both her and Tracy had agreed to the plans of continuing their studies under private tutors. This would allow them to flexibly work at the shop as well. Once this was done, Harry Potter had summoned someone who was a free elf. The elf had hugged Harry and cried about someone called Dobby, before hearing Harry's request and bonding with the family. Winky was then introduced to everyone and told to help move the Davises to the family house in 12, Grimmauld Place. While Daphne had expected him to help them, she had not thought that Harry would have wanted them to be a part of their daily life. And yet, the boy seemed to surprise her more and more. It had been a good day, the day she had met him. Bridge had been a useless teacher, and both her and Tracy had managed to pass only by the skin of their teeth. Thus, it was decided to approach Harry Potter, who was the best in the subject, for some private tutoring. Everyone in the school knew about the defense club from last year and how the students from that had the best scores. Daphne had expected it to be tough to get him to accept their proposal. She had found him on top of the astronomy tower, gazing into the distance, tears falling down his eyes. She said nothing but simply sat down next to him in silence. He looked at her, recognized her but did not say anything. They sat in silence, no one saying anything before Harry got up, whispered, "Thank you," and went his way. This pattern continued for a week before she managed the courage to ask him. He simply agreed. She could tell he was suffering, but he hid it well and she did not pry. While Tracy still remained a bit reserved, she opened up to him a bit. He was nothing like the image of him in the Slytherin house, not that she listened to what Malfoy sprouted anyways. Soon, they were acquaintances. Suddenly, the dinner came back to her mind and she let a small smile make its way to her face. After everything was said and done, she had become a member of the House Black. She still held Teddy in her arms. The little boy refused to leave her embrace and had to be forcefully given to Harry. It was then that he struck again. Daphne like hair, Harry like eyes. Both of them blushed, but somehow, she made it worse. Not knowing what came over her, she leaned in and planted a soft kiss on his cheek. They both blushed even more. Both mothers looked on with smirks on their faces while Tracy had given her a truly lecherous grin. Harry had not seemed offended one bit. In fact, had responded to her in kind before whispering, "Thank you," into her ear. His hot breath, so close to her ear, had ignited a warm feeling in her, one that had originated in her gut traveled all the way up to her face, causing her blush to deepen even further. Soon, she was in the land of Morpheus, dreaming of lonely moments atop the astronomy tower, with Harry's arms around her in a firm yet a warm and loving embrace. It had been an eventful 2 months in the life of Harry James Potter Black, head of the clan Potter Black. While he detested his overly long official name and detested the monikers, the people of Wizarding Britain used for him even more. The boy who lived and the man who won. A constant reminder of all that he had lost due to deluded, power-hungry fools who had ideas of grandeur far beyond their station and people who followed them like nameless sheep, hoping for a sliver of their power or a share of their glory. All it got them was a lifetime of suffering and torment and life of unfulfillment. He, on the other hand, had moved on with his life. The last couple of months had flown by in a storm. People to meet, places to be. Teddy to be fed. Sometimes, why wondered if the kid had an endless pit for a stomach. Coming from someone who had shared his meals with Ron Weasley, this was a big observation. If Creature was complaining about how much young Master ate, you knew something was wrong. A simple visit to a healer had done the trick. It seemed that being a metamorph magus and having a werewolf father had given Teddy the metabolism of a nuclear reactor. His body was in a constant state of flux and the extra food was his way to augment the energy used. Teddy had also taken it well with new people moving to 12, Grimmauld Place. It had taken the N.E.W.L.Y. minted Miss Black and the Davises less than a few hours to pack up their own stuff with the help of Winky and move it to Grimmauld Place. While Creature had opened up a new section of the house, previously unknown to the occupants for the new tenants, Andy had managed to get the house ready. A pureblood's house was a reflection of his personal hygiene, Andromeda had told while he had rubbed tea. He bridge of his nose and shaken his head in mirth. The biggest surprise for everyone had been the breakfast next day. As Daphne and Tracy, who had been given a tour of the house yesterday, made their way to the kitchen. They were greeted with the sounds of the most off-note song they had heard, followed by giggling by none other than Teddy. That was to be Potter. Merlin, he is horrible, said Tracy. Better go inside. I am hungry enough to ignore that, smirked Daphne. The kitchen looked exactly like they had expected, except for the fact that it was Potter who had been cooking, while Winky looked on helped whenever she could. Daphne tiptoed to have a look. Harry had 3 pans on the stove going, one of them with frying bacon in it while the other 2 had partially cooked omelets in them. You cook, Potter? Asked Tracy. Yeah, girls. Good morning to you too. How do you like your eggs? Replied Harry. After taking their orders, Harry proceeded to make them, while Tracy chatted within. Andromeda and Daphne played with Teddy and fed him. Creature muttered something about cleaning rooms before popping away. Soon, they were joined by the sleepy Belinda Davis, who had her order taken as well. Soon the whole clan was sitting at the breakfast table, having their meal as they chatted about their day ahead. Harry sighed. This is it. I've made it, he thought to himself before another thought had him chuckle for a moment. But he soon adopted a horrified expression. Harry, you all right? Asked Andromeda. 4 women in a house and 1 Harry Potter. By Merlin, you people will be the ATH of me, said Harry with a grin on his face. He was replied with truly ferocious grins from Tracy and Daphne which had him quivering while Belinda and Andromeda looked at each and smirked. The kid old go out of his way to help others but for all he had done and witnessed, he was a naive teenager after all. And thus, the Black household had set down in a daily routine. Tracy and Daphne would alternate shifts at the shops while Belinda would do her shift at the odd jobs she had picked up during her days on the run. Even though Harry insisted she let them go and stay at home as he could support them all without breaking a sweat. She refused. In her own words, now that her daughters were cared for, she needed a purpose in life. While Harry did not agree with her point, he understood the sentiment and where it was coming from. Andromeda was on official, pureblood tutoring duties for Harry, though it mainly consisted of stopping Teddy from hurting himself before taunting and poking Harry to improve his posture and whatnot. Harry soon realized, he was the busiest of the lot. With all his meetings with his managers for his holding in Gringotts, to his studies, and meeting with Kingsley. He had a lot to do throughout the week. And still, he made time for his family. For him, they were his first priority and everything else came second. It was a surprise to him when he realized how quickly the Davises had wormed their way into his life and his heart. Like a man lost to the oceans, he had nowhere to be and nothing to do. And it had been the likes of Teddy, Andromeda, and Dauphin, who had been like life support for him. They had rescued from the sea of despair and torment he was going to drown himself in, only to come out from shit smelling like roses. He had a new life, a purpose, and a reason to live. Teddy was the adorable son while Andy and Belinda were the mothers of the group. Tracy was the quirky, quick to embarrass him, sister he had never had. Daphne though, he could not put his finger on. She was smart, funny, resourceful, and charming. The Ice Queen, persona he had been used to in school from her was merely a mask to hide the warm, caring, and loving person she was underneath. She had always known her fate, in a manner of sorts, and had decided not to risk herself being lost to that life. Enter, the Ice Queen, persona. Alas, for good or for worse, she had been allowed to run away and live her life on her own. For her, the end of the war had meant her freedom. In a twisted sort of way, it was the same for him as well. Her smile would light the whole room when Tracy would make a funny comment or an observation. The slightest of blushes would make its way to her face when they inadvertently touched hands. She was really good with Teddy, who simply adored her. She was good at reading and understanding people and their actions. He knew he liked her a lot, cared for her, and wanted nothing more than to spend even more time with her, to get to know her better. He, however, doubted himself. After all that he had been through and achieved, the demons of his upbringing refused to leave him. Sometimes, the little boy inside the cupboard would pop out. The little boy, who feared the only people he knew as his relatives, who had told him to hide his emotions and tears. The same people, who had told him he was less worthy than the dirt on their shoes. For all his newfound confidence and worth, he strived for a life where he was left alone, with no responsibility, somewhere he was a nobody. And yet, he knew he would not let Teddy go for anything in this world. He was, and he knew it to be true, a confused, young man. As the sun rose over the burrow, Hermione Granger woke up early as usual. It was a surprise to her when she realized that aside from Mr. Weasley, she would usually be the only person awake in the house. As she made her way downstairs to get her daily cup of tea, she could not help but wonder how life had been completely different a year ago. A year on the run had left its scars on all of them, especially her and Harry. Mrs. Weasley was a protective mother, and while it was not a bad quality, it had left Ron with a sheltered upbringing. Coupled with his emotional range of a teaspoon, she should have seen the problems that would soon arise during their year, and yet, she had not and had been helpless to stop him when he had eventually run away. He had come back eventually and helped them in the end, but the Golden Trio, as they were affectionately called, was done. Even though he had not shown it, Y had never trusted Ron completely, and she, overjoyed to have him back, had not noticed the signs. It wasn't open, but Harry had steadily started to separate himself from Ron. Spending less time with him, not playing chess, not talking about Quidditch. While they have looked okay on the surface, she could see Harry not ever trust Ron fully again. And Ron had been oblivious to that. He had always been envious of Harry's fame and popularity, and even after knowing how much Harry hated being in the public limelight, Ron had always chased after it. While she wasn't an expert in psychology, she could tell it was due to his being the smallest son in a large family. A curse breaker, a Quidditch phenom and dragon handler, a Ministry of Magic worker, and successful entrepreneurs. Ron had always had big shoes to fill, and his only way of doing that had been being best friends with the boy who lived. And while Harry always had this habit of putting others above him, Ron did not have that. To be honest, no one would, and yet, they had been blessed to be friends with a caring and loving man like Harry Potter. And they had foolishly let it slip. As she reached the kitchen, she could see the Alr.ed steaming kettle and a cup of tea waiting for her. Mr. Weasley was sitting on the table, reading his newspaper as he had his own up. This had sort of become a tradition for them. He had always been a father figure to her in the wizarding world, and nowadays, he was there for her in a more real sense as well. She would come down early morning and they would have a cup of tea together. He would tell her about his daily work at the ministry and the work that was being done to negate a year of war, while she would voice her concerns and thoughts, and he would try his best to guide her. She was a young woman. There were limits to what he could help her with. "Morning, Mr. Weasley." "Morning, Hermione. I hope you slept," replied Mr. Weasley. "Yes, Mr. Weasley. Thankfully, all the twins' booby traps have been dealt with," she said. "How many times have I told you, Hermione? Call me Arthur, please. I know I am old, I don't need to be reminded of it every time we talk," he said with a chuckle. "Yes, Arthur," she replied and sat down to have her tea in silence. "Something bothering you, Hermione?" he asked after some time. "Yeah, I worried about Harry. How he's doing and all. I thought things were Supposed to get better after the war, she said with a sad shake of her head. They are supposed to be Hermione. But we have to agree, we played our fair share in the situation being as it is. He saker. Ifist so much for all of us, and yet when it was time for us to welcome him with open arms, we all got lost in our own worlds. Molly had just lost her son. I would have been surprised if she had not said or done something like this. Ginny had broken up with the boy she had heard stories of since she was in diapers. She was distraught. Ron was Ron. I cannot say anything about that. It was me and you, who are more responsible than them. In a way, he said. It was surprising for Hermione to hear him talk in a sad, detached voice. We were supposed to temper them, to make them see his side of the saint. Ori, but all we did at the time was stay silent and let the thing play out on its own. In a way, our silence was a crime in itself. The house soon descended into silence once again, as both the occupant TS of the table thought back to the day about which they had been talking about. It had been a month since his previous visit, and Harry had sent her a letter saying that he would love to meet them on CE again and hoped that tempers had settled down a bit. He also said he would be bringing Teddy and Andromeda along, which was met with delight by everyone. While he had hoped Bill would be there, he knew he was in France with his in-laws and deserved the break from everything back home. Needless to say, the day being bright and sunny, not in all foreshadowing the stormy clouds that would later descend upon the burrow. As the group arrived using an unfamiliar elf to the backstep, it was easy to see what had changed in the time gone by. Harry looked fitter and was well dressed for the first time in his life. Gone were the handoffs from his cousins. He looked striking in tight jeans and a simple polo shirt. In his arms was Teddy, who was currently asleep, with his usual combination of black hair and amethyst eyes. Andromeda followed behind while casting a glance to the surrounding areas around the burrow. "Hello, everyone. How are you all?" said Harry as he made his way inside. While she would have liked nothing more than to hold Harry in a tight hug, she could not due to the presence of a baby sleeping in his arms. Sharing pleasantries, they had moved inside and settled in the common area. She was bursting to ask Harry some questions, and he could tell that. Taking pity on her, he spoke first. "So Hermione, how have you been?" "Never mind me, Harry. How have you been? Obviously being a godfather suits you. You look really happy." "Thanks, my own. I have had a lot on my plate, to be honest. My parents and Sirius left me a sizable inheritance, so I've been helping with that. Plus, with raising Teddy and learning about the Wizengamot, I have very little time to myself." Even though he had been looking at her while speaking, she could see he had been looking around as well, judging everyone's reactions. Mr. Weasley was smiling at him while Molly, Ron, and Ginny looked at him with nondescript faces. "We recently moved back to 12 Grimmauld Place, and with the help of Creature have renovated the place. It looks much nicer than before, and that has allowed Andy to do something to pass the time as well," he said while looking over at Andromeda, who had taken Teddy from him and was cradling him. Teddy was still sleeping through all the talk that was going on. "Aside from all that, I will be soon joining a new tutoring session, so I wanted to invite you and Ron for that as well." Ron merely grunted while she pondered about this offer a bit. While she would have loved to get tutored personally, she loved to read in a more classroom-like environment with teachers like Professor McGonagall. She didn't know if the small class dynamic would suit her. "Thanks for the offer, Harry, but I think I'd prefer to go back to Hogwarts. I would miss the library a bit too much," she said. The statement incited a chuckle from everyone. She hoped that this mood would soon pass. Merlin, how wrong she had been. "So you're studying alone with all the tutors?" asked Ron. These were the first words he had spoken to Harry since a hello, and Hermione knew that Harry had noticed that. Yet, he had not said anything. This sort of a reaction from Harry both intrigued her and worried her. It spelled disaster for a friendship already on the brink of breaking apart, and Hermione knew that she would be stuck in the middle of it. No, actually, it was Neville's idea to study under the tutors. Him, Sue Bones, and Hannah had already decided on that course of actions, and he offered me to join them. There will be a couple more people as well joining us. Was all Ron said. "So, how's being a lord treating you now? Have you made any headway into the Wizengamot and how to get laws passed? If you want, I can surely help you with them," asked Hermione. "It's all right, my own. It's a bit too early for all that. I am still hoping to get a hang of how all things work and get my alliances down and all before I can actually start pushing for laws and such. Kingsley has been a real help in all this. The expression on Ron's face left it to no one's imagination how much he was disliking this conversation, and Hermione was hoping Ron did not end up putting his foot in his mouth like he sometimes did. He was already on thin ice. Of course, he would. You are Harry Potter, holder of countless titles, lord of a house. Who wouldn't want to be associated with you? Ron said scathingly. Before Harry could even reply, Andromeda spoke up in a tone that promised pain. For your information, Mr. Weasley, it's Clan Potter Black now. It was times like these when Harry was reminded of the relation Andromeda shared with Bellatrix Lestrange. While she was a calm, composed, and loving person, there were times he had been scared to piss her off. The look on her face and the tone of her voice promised pain and suffering, and Harry knew only a foolish person would challenge it. Mr. Weasley thankfully tried a change of topic at this point, to prevent the conversation degrading into a battle of words. It seemed he was the only person in the burrow who had understood the implication of that statement. A clan, you say? Except for the Potters, what's the other family? He asked Harry. The Davises, replied Harry simply. Would that be Marcus and Belinda Davis? He continued, and Harry simply nodded his confirmation, and he continued with his thought process. With Marcus's death, there were rumors that Belinda and her daughter Tracy had fled to the Muggle world. There were even rumors of the Greengrass heiress being with them, he said. Spot on, Mr. Weasley, Harry replied. What did you get in the barter? He asked. Hermione, for once in her life, felt completely out of the conversation, and this was new to her. While she had read up on the basic system of the magical houses and lords, this was something beyond her grasp. That was actually how I met them. I'd gone shopping with Andy for Teddy's clothes, and they had opened up a shop in London. I'd known Daphne from school, and we had a cup of coffee and caught up a bit. When I met with Kingsley later on, he advised me to get training from someone who knew their way around the Mo. Ergo, I contacted Daphne. He said. Mr. Weasley simply nodded to him. This statement, though straightforward and simple, had left a lot of questions unanswered for the rest of the Weasleys present. It was Hermione who went first. Since when were you friends with Daphne Greengrass and Tracy Davis, Harry? You were what? Shouted Ron. Harry ignored him and chose to acknowledge Hermione instead. I'd known them since 6th year, my own. Dauphin. He approached me with some help with her Dada studies and I obliged. It wasn't much, but I helped her and her sister, along with Tracy sometimes. That's how I got to know them. Were this the private training that you did a lot? Prodded Hermione. Sometimes, Harry replied with a smirk. Ginny looked troubled and Mrs. Weasley looked as if she had a hard time digesting all the facts that had come to light in this conversation. You trained Slytherins. Are you crazy, Harry? We were at war. They could have ambushed you. What were you even thinking? Just because a pretty girl asks you for help, you run towards her with your tail tucked between your legs. Before Ron could finish his rant, Harry had stood up. Enough, Ron. Previously on A Place to All Home. You trained Slytherins. Are you crazy, Harry? We were at war. They could have ambushed you. What were you even thinking? Just because a pretty girl asks you for help, you run towards her with your tail tucked between your legs. Enough, Ron, shouted Harry. 4x. Stop. Just stop. Stop seeing the world as good and bad, black and white. Yes, they are Slytherins. I did not train them, I taught them, just like the DA. You don't know them at all. So you don't get to comment on them or how I know them. They are my friends and I would like it if you would treat them with respect. If not, I have no interest in talking to you then. Before Ron could say anything else, Mr. Weasley stopped him. He's right, Ron. A lot of people who fought with us against you know who were Slytherins in school. Kingsley and Mad-Eye were both Slytherins. This Eddie House rivalry was blown out of proportion and meant nothing when you stepped out in the real world, he said with authority. It was a tone Ron knew, a tone that signified the topic closed. Suddenly, a baby's cry pierced the silence. Teddy had woken up in spite of Andromeda's efforts. Harry rushed to her side and took Teddy from her. Hermione and Ginny meanwhile, had made their way towards him to take a glance at the baby. Teddy's amethyst eyes shone back brightly at them and he became quiet, before grabbing a handful of Hermione's frizzy hair and giving it a pull. "Ouch, Teddy," she cried. Hearing the high-pitched noise, he let go but did not stop staring at her. His smile made Hermione laugh as well, the pain temporarily forgotten. Ginny had seen those eyes before but could not place them. They were ticking her off for some unknown reason. Still cradling Teddy, Harry spoke to Mr. Weasley. "They offered me a partnership in the shop. Joining the clan would allow them to come back in to the wizarding world under the protection of the house and prevent the business and them from unnecessary trouble." Mr. Weasley simply nodded. He knew enough about the world to know that 3 unmarried witches in the wizarding world would be in a big spot of bother, and this was one of the few ways in which they could protect themselves. Effectively, they had found the only man who would possibly not exploit them. "You are a good man, Harry Potter. Never forget that," he said. Harry cracked a rare smile towards him before muttering a low, "Thanks." Suddenly, Hermione turned towards him. "Harry, now that Teddy is a metamorph magus, but why does he look like he had Daphne Greengrass's eyes?" "Black, Daphne black," Harry replied. He had known this would come up one way or the other and he would have to nip this conversation in the bud. Considering the current environment, this conversation would only go one way. "Oh what? Yes Hermione, I think you heard that right. Just cause Daphne was disowned by her parents legally. She was effectively Daphne no name in the wizarding world and was in essence, to be treated worse than a muggleborn or a squib. The logical way for her was to be made a member of House Black. This way, she could help me and would not need to be under oaths to keep my secrets." Win. Go on," she prodded. "A week ago, they moved into Grimmauld Place and have been living there ever since," was all he managed before Mrs. Weasley interrupted. "Young man, are you telling me you are currently living with 4 unmarried witches? I will not allow this kind of debauchery from you." Harry was getting pissed off now, Hermione could tell. While he had improved his ability to keep his temper in check, she could see cracks appear in his facade. For the first time, his anger was accompanied by a sudden cold that had set in the burrow. "Excuse me, you heard me right. I will not allow this kind of behavior from you. To break up with my poor daughter, just so you can take advantage of other witches. I raised you better than that and you should be ashamed of yourself," she all but shouted at him. Harry handed Teddy back to Andromeda, who had risen from her seat but at down back again due to Harry handing Teddy back to her. "I'm sorry, but you have no right to make comments like that without knowing anything about me or the people I live with. There is nothing of the sorts going on like you are thinking. They are members of my family and are treated as such. Andy and Belinda are like mothers to me. I've lived here, with your family for some years. You know the kind of person I am, and yet, for the sake of finding a different reason for my breakup with your daughter, you think it is okay for you to drag the honor of people I love and care for through dirt. Molly, he is a grown man and," Mr. Weasley said hastily but was cut off by Harry. "I'm sorry to stop you, Mr. Weasley, but I would like to say my piece first. I am a grown man and I can make my own decisions. Daphne and Tracy are friends of mine and for no rhyme or reason are being accused of having inappropriate relations with me. My reasons for breaking up with Ginny were conveyed to her and those are the actual reasons. She knows it, but if she chooses to refuse them, that is at her own prerogative. You are mature adults and I would have expected you to at least understand the position I am coming from. Ron, I knew would behave like this. He has proven time and time again that he is an insensitive jerk with deep prejudices. Ginny, I had hoped would understand where I was coming from. You, on the other hand, was someone I looked up to as a mother. Being a parent yourself, how could you even think I would expose my son to such an environment? I may be new to all this, but I know at my current priority is Teddy and everything I do it with his best in my mind. Too long have I lived by decisions made by others for my life and I will not put up with it much longer. It is why respect for you that I do not take offense to what you have said and bring down legal action like I am entitled to. I knew you were a wanker, Potter, but I would have never expected you to be like that prick, Malfoy," Ron sneered, as he spat on the ground in front of him. Suddenly, he was banished across the room and struck the wall and collapsed to the ground. "Never, compare to me to that blonde ferret. Mr. Weasley, I think we have overstayed our welcome. Please accept my apologies for creating a scene at your house. I bid you adieu." As he turned around and walked out of the room, he did N.O.T.C. Hermione and Ginny rushing to check up in Ron while Mr. Weasley looked sad and dejected. Mrs. Weasley just stared at the place he had stood, having never been spoken to like that, wondering, did he say, "my son"? As soon as he was outside the wards of the burrow, Harry shook his head to clear his thoughts before he grabbed Andromeda and disapparated. This was the first time Teddy had apparated and it showed. The baby suddenly adopted a grimace and didn't look well in general. Knowing what was to come, Andromeda took him to the bathroom, while she instructed Harry to cool off. Not knowing where to go, he simply ended up walking to where his feet led, lost in his thoughts. He was torn between the future and the past. Ron, Hermione, and the Weasleys had been his first friends, first real semblance on a family ever. He had spent 7 years of his life with them, from all his adventures to summers at the Burrow, playing Quidditch and gorging themselves at the daily feasts that Mrs. Weasley used to cook. He had hoped, prayed even, that they understood his side of the story. They looked at things from his point of view. Alas, it wasn't to be. He had hoped time would help temper their emotions. That level heads would prevail. He had literally felt sick after shouting all stuff that at Mrs. Weasley. Ron had always been an insensitive prick and today was probably the final nail in the coffin. It had been coming, since probably the Triwizard Tournament, but it was here. He was a grown man and he had other things to do than run after friends who were jealous of him. And if that friend was someone he had cared for. Ginny was someone he had not expected to behave like this. He had expected her to shout at him, call him unfaithful and probably insinuate what Mrs. Weasley had been implying. However, she hadn't uttered a word. She had simply accepted the situation with silence, and he was happy with how things were with her. It sounded insensitive, he knew, but it was as the easy way out and he was ashamed to say he had taken that road. Over time, he hoped they would go back to being friends. Hermione had been like Hermione, asking questions and demanding answers. Staying at the Burrow had done her a world of good and Harry was happy to see that. She was someone who deserved some peace and quiet and he truly hoped she would find it. Unknown to him, he had walked directly into the kitchen. A kitchen which was occupied the very person who had been a major topic of discussion at his visit to the Burrow. "Harry, everything all right?" asked Daphne in a soft voice. Broken out of his musings, Harry looked up to see Daphne sitting at the table, having a cup of tea, looking worriedly at him. "Yeah, Daph, everything's fine. Where's the rest of the gang? Tracy and Mrs. D are at work. It only is here. Andy must be with Teddy, I presume." Harry simply nodded and sat down next to her. Winky, bless her soul, brought him a cup of tea. "If you are fine, then I am the queen of this world," she replied with a smirk. Harry couldn't help but chuckle. She could be the queen of sass if she wanted to be. "It's nothing. The visit to the Burrow did not go as well as I had planned," Harry replied as he shook his head. "Hermione or the Weasel, I would thank you to not club all the Weasleys together. While Ron may have his faults, I have nothing but the utmost respect for Mr. Weasley and Bill," he replied with a scathing look. Daphne simply looked down at her feet, not wanting to meet his eyes. "It's all right, Daph. Sorry for talking to you like that. I'm a bit tired with everything that happened today and one of the reasons for the argument was Ron clubbing you and Tracy along with the rest of the Slytherins. When I kinda saw you doing the same thing, I snapped. It's okay Harry, I understand. I'm sure things will be okay with them. Time is a great healer. I know you tried your best to make them understand but you have to remember, they went through a war as well. Everyone lost someone they loved, and every person has a different coping mechanism. You found a way to not spiral down a dark path and you took it. It's not the same for them all you see. And do is try to guide them and help them not go down this road again. You are only human after all." Harry simply looked at her. "Thanks, Daph. I really needed that," as he laid his head on her shoulders and closed his eyes. A sense of peace flowed through his entire being. It had taken her a single conversation to help alleviate his mood. And she was right. He truly was lucky to have found Teddy, Andy, and her in this tough time. They were his rocks, his support system. With a small smile on his lips, he drifted off. An off-duty Tracy would later find the pair as they had been, heads resting on each other. A content smile on their faces. The next day was filled with some teasing and generally typical Tracy behavior before everyone headed off their own ways. However, Andromeda pulled Harry aside into Teddy's room. "Harry, what's going on between you and Daphne?" Suddenly, Harry felt like he was under scrutiny. It was a question had been pondering for some time. He thought being honest with Andromeda here would surely help him get some answer. "I don't know, Andy. I like her a lot. While Tracy is like a sister to me, Daphne is something else. She's funny, compassionate, and understands me. Yesterday only, when you sent me to cool off, all it took was a 5-minute conversation with her. She is someone special. Yeah, we all saw that. And I sense a but coming. But I am not sure whether she feels the same way. We've been brought up different, expect different things in life. This is where I fell off with Ginny, and I guess I am not sure about asking her about them in fear of being rejected by her." Andromeda looked at him with a mild interest. "Oh Harry. Only you would be a big enough fool to not see that that girl is taken by you. I knew it the day you met her at the shop. And I have known since the day you guys got here. Every moment you guys spend together, I see your mutual affection grow little by little. Belinda actually pointed out to me when you guys were taking care of Teddy last week and said you guys looked cute together." Harry simply blushed. It seemed, he had been blessed with people who would make him see light. That night, as he sat down on the sofa in the living room to listen to his daily dose of Pink Floyd, Harry reflected back on days that had gone by. Yesterday with the Weasleys and today with Andromeda. He was not surprised when he realized which conversation meant more to him. Teddy was sleeping in his arms, and like he had told Molly, he would do what was best for him and his son. Suddenly, someone poked their head in. "Hey, Harry, what you up to?" asked Daphne. Harry turned around and a smile made his way unabashed to his face. "Hey, Daph. Work went well, I hope." "Yeah, the shop is ready for its opening tomorrow. We were hoping you would be there with all of us." "Of course, I would be honored to be there. Promise me though, Teddy gets to be the first one to buy something," said Harry. "Of course, it would be my pleasure," replied Daphne before sitting down next to Harry and snuggling herself next to him. Instinctively, Harry put his arm around her shoulders. As she snuggled in closer, Harry gave her a stioning look and was replied with, "It was a long day." With Daphne by his side and Teddy in his arms, Harry closed his eyes and listened as "Coming Back to Life" came on. He truly was home. That's it for today, I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to check out my Patreon. Details in description.